Chapter 103. The weather was gradually getting colder. It was a good autumn. By now, Zhang Xiaohua had already finished reading all of the Lotus Flower Escort Agency's fist manuals, but hadn't read any of the blade or sword manuals. There was once when Zhang Xiaohua helped him return the last fist manual and conveniently took a sword manual. When the library's manager was registering it, Zhang Xiaohua remembered that he had only begged the third Master Chu to borrow the library's fist manuals. He nervously watched the manager register it, but who knew that the manager didn't even ask much and was only surprised that he had only borrowed one manual this time. This allowed Zhang Xiaohu to let out a sigh of relief. However, Zhang Xiaohua didn't seem to have the aptitude to learn sword manuals. He flipped through it no less than 10 times. But still couldn't understand the contents. This made him feel very strange. He could recognize the words and understand the sword moves, but he just couldn't understand it and couldn't remember it. Thus, he could only throw it to the side. From then on, Zhang Xiaohu no longer went to the library to borrow books. This made the busy manager feel very strange. His idle days made him feel very uncomfortable. Zhang Xiaohua spent most of his time learning from Li Jifeng. He only closed his eyes in the evening to recall his own fist techniques. On this day, Zhang Xiaohua sat on the Kong and flipped through some of the books that Li Jifeng had given him. Just as he was reading with interest, Zhang Xiaohu pushed open the door and came in. Zhang Xiaohua happily said, "Second brother, why are you back so early today?" Zhang Xiaohu's smile was a bit forced as he said, "I practiced fist techniques in the martial arts hall all morning today. I'm a bit tired. Also," speaking to hear, his tone was a bit hesitant. Zhang Xiaohua saw that her second brother didn't continue and felt very strange. She said, "What's wrong? Second brother, did something happen in the martial arts hall?" Zhang Xiaohu lowered his head and thought for a moment before saying, "It's like this. Xiaohua, the dojo is going to teach me Nigong mantras tomorrow, so they told me to come back early to rest and prepare for tomorrow's work." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she was so happy that she almost jumped off the Kong bed and said, "That's great, second brother. I didn't think that the dojo would teach you internal strength so soon. I really have to congratulate you. I thought it would take at least a few years. Ha ha ha, when you learn it, you can teach me. I can also learn the Nigong mantra. Let Yulin be envious of me. I am Superman Xiaohua." Before Zhang Xiaohua could finish rejoicing, he suddenly remembered the expression on Zhang Xiaohu's face when he first entered the room. Immediately, he knew that things were not as simple as he thought. There seemed to be a problem. As expected, there was no joy on Zhang Xiaohu's face. Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand and asked, "Second brother, what's going on? It's probably because you can't teach me." Zhang Xiaohu nodded affirmatively and said, "Yes, Xiaohua. Today, the third Master Chu told me that he was going to teach me the Nigong mantra tomorrow. I asked him if I could teach you after I learned it. But the third Master Chu said that the Nigong mantra was a secret of the Lotus Flower Escort Agency. Only the people of the Lotus Flower Escort Agency could learn it with special permission. Don't look at how many people in the dojo are learning it. Those who could get the third Master Chu to agree to learn the Nigong mantra were few and far between. He, you don't know, but Xiaohua, the third Master Chu also knows how to form cliques and factions. He just had to hint to me that I should join their camp. I don't even know who this escort agency belongs to or what factions they belong to. Of course I was happy to agree. People say that they can enjoy the shade of a big tree behind them. I'm not so stupid as to not accept this olive branch." Zhang Xiaohua's face was full of disappointment as he pursed his lips and said, "What kind of lousy Nigong mantra is this? It's so secretive. How about, second brother, you secretly teach me and I won't tell anyone? How about it?" Zhang Xiaohu smiled wryly and said, "It would be great if it were that simple. The third Master Chu also said that Nigong mantra isn't like fist techniques or blade techniques. The practice of Nigong mantra isn't something that can be done in a day. Only after practicing to a very deep level can one have the qualifications to teach others. If I teach you right after I start practicing, then to be honest, I'll be harming you and you'll really go crazy. If I teach you after I've practiced to a certain level, you'll probably have other opportunities by then. I think the third Master Chu's words make a lot of sense. What do you think? Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua spread out her hands and said, Second brother, how would I know? I've never practiced Nigong mantra before. Sigh, forget it. If you don't want to teach me, then don't teach me. I don't care about this lousy Nigong mantra anyway. I haven't even learned my own fizz techniques yet. Zhang Xiaohu didn't believe her and continued to ask, You're really not going to pester me to teach you anymore? Zhang Xiaohua giggled and said, Forget it, really forget it. However, you still have to tell me some of your cultivation experiences, okay? Zhang Xiaohu rubbed his chin and said, About this, I don't think the third Master Chu mentioned it before. It should be okay. Zhang Xiaohua clapped and said, Then it's settled. I want to see what kind of Nigong I can learn in the future. I want to see if it's you or me who's better at it. Zhang Xiaohu's heart ached and said, And of course it's you who's better. I have a premonition. Actually, the third Master Chu still had some words that Zhang Xiaohu didn't tell Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua's right hand was already crippled. Not only could she not do heavy work or carry heavy objects, but the meridians in her hand might have been destroyed. Without the meridians in her hand, how could she have complete Nigong mantra? In other words, Zhang Xiaohua might not be able to cultivate any Nigong mantra. Thus, Zhang Xiaohu spent most of his time in the room practicing Nigong mantra, sitting cross-legged on the Kong bed with his 5 centers facing the sky. His eyes focused on his nose, and his nose focused on his heart as he cultivated Nigong mantra. Zhang Xiaohua looked at her second brother's appearance, and was curious and amused. Could it be that this clay bodhisattva was cultivating Nigong mantra? It was really strange. However, she knew that Zhang Xiaohu was also a beginner. Even if she asked, he wouldn't be able to explain clearly. Thus, she shut her mouth and carefully watched from the side. She was afraid that she would make a sound and disturb her second brother. Actually, cultivating Nigong mantra required silence. Only by remaining silent in one's body would one be able to create Nigong mantra. Most beginners would use a quiet room to practice. Zhang Xiaohu also used a quiet room when he was at the martial arts dojo. When he returned to the room, he knew that it wasn't suitable for him to cultivate Nigong mantra. However, he was used to working hard and didn't have any room for improvement in Nigong mantra. Of course, it was fine if he was the only one in the room, but if there was someone else, it would be dangerous. Fortunately, Zhang Xiaohua was injured and couldn't move. She also knew that she shouldn't disturb her second brother, so nothing happened. Today, Zhang Xiaohu went to the martial arts dojo to practice, leaving Zhang Xiaohua in the room. She was sitting on the Kong bed, bored. Someone knocked on the door and waited for someone to come in. It was Mr. Li Jinfeng. Li Jinfeng smiled as he entered the room with some books in his hands. He had been busy with his homework recently and hadn't been here for a long time. First, he asked about Zhang Xiaohua's injuries. When he heard that she had recovered, he was very happy. Then, he chatted with Zhang Xiaohua about the books he left behind last time. Zhang Xiaohua was also reading very seriously. She had a lot of questions in her heart, so the two of them talked very lively. Some questions even caused the two of them to fiercely defend themselves. As the two of them were talking, someone knocked on the door again. Zhang Xiaohua was very strange. No one came to her second brother's room. Why were there 2 people knocking on the door today? He raised his voice and said, Come in. However, the door didn't open and no one came in. Zhang Xiaohua was even more confused. Who was it? He shouted again. There's someone in the room. Come in. The person still didn't come in. Li Jinfeng looked at Zhang Xiaohua and walked to the door. When he opened the door, he saw a young woman standing outside. He cupped his hands and said, Miss, who are you looking for? The woman said strangely, Did I find the wrong room? Is this where Zhang Xiaohu lives? Li Jinfeng saw this and hurriedly said, Miss, you've found the right room. This is where Zhang Xiaohu lives, but he's not here for the time being. Oh, I see. The woman's expression relaxed and said, "Then is his brother Zhang Xiaohua here? I'm from Huanxi Manor. I came to see him." Li Jifeng heard and said, "He's here. Zhang Xiaohua is sitting on the Kong bed. He's injured. The doctor said that it's a critical period and he should try not to get off the Kong bed, so he hasn't come out. Please come in," the woman said. "Was the person who spoke just now Zhang Xiaohua?" Li Jifeng said strangely. "Yes, he was the one who asked you to come in. Haven't you heard him speak before?" the woman said. "His voice doesn't sound right." After saying this, Li Jifeng invited the woman into the room. After the woman entered the room, Zhang Xiaohua saw who it was and was extremely happy. He shouted, "Qiu Tong's sister, why are you here?" As he said this, he was about to jump off the Kong bed. Qiu Tong took a few steps forward and pressed on his shoulder, saying, "Zhang Xiaohua, don't get off the Kong bed. Didn't your friend say that the doctor didn't want you to move? Quickly sit down." Zhang Xiaohua said happily, "It's okay, Qiu Tong's sister. I've been playing under the Kong bed a few days ago. It's just that the doctor saw me and said that this is the last period and I have to be very careful. I don't want to waste all my efforts. That's why he asked me to guard this Kong bed." After saying this, he was about to swing his arm. Li Jifeng saw this and hurriedly ran over. He held him down and said, "Don't force yourself. You can play in a few days." Seeing that the two of them were concerned about him, Zhang Xiaohua chuckled and sat back on the Kong bed. He said to Qiu Tong, "Qiu Tong's sister, this is my teacher. His name is Li Jifeng." Qiu Tong was puzzled again and asked, "Teacher?" Li Jifeng blushed and said, "Miss Qiu Tong, don't listen to Zhang Xiaohua's nonsense. I'm just a student who came to Pingyang City with him. I hit it off with him and his brother at first sight. Recently, I saw that he was injured, so I came to take a look." After that, he briefly told Zhang Xiaohua about how he taught her how to read. In the end, he said, "It's nothing. Xiaohua is very smart. It's just a piece of cake for me. I can't be considered an enlightened teacher." Qiu Tong was happy to hear this. She said, "You taught Xiaohua how to read, so naturally you're her teacher. This title is fixed. However, if you treat him as a younger brother, he can call you brotherly. That's fine. Oh right, Zhang Xiaohua, you can actually write now. That's amazing. When you're better, you have to write for me." Zhang Xiaohua heard this and was about to stand up. She said, "I write with my left hand." "Qiu Tong's sister, I can write for you now." When Qiu Tong heard this, she suddenly realized that she was using her left hand. She quickly said, "No need, there's no need to rush. You can do it in the future." However, now that Zhang Xiaohua had a chance to show off, she wanted to share something fun with others. She insisted on writing now. Hence, Li Jifeng put the brush and ink on the Kong bed. In the end, Zhang Xiaohua's few words were as good as Li Jifeng's praise. Qiu Tong was very happy for Zhang Xiaohua and kept praising him. Zhang Xiaohua's smile became even brighter. After asking about the recent situation, Qiu Tong then explained the purpose of her visit. "A few months ago, Third Uncle Chu sent someone to the village head to say that you were injured at the escort agency and wanted to stay there to recuperate. I wanted to ask the village head to let you return to the village to recuperate. The people in the escort agency are all men. How would they know how to take care of you? However, the village head said that you were considered a member of the agency. Moreover, your brother is here. If you were to recuperate in the village, your brother would miss you very much. Hence, I didn't send you to the village. After that, I went to the south to settle some matters. I just returned recently, and saw that you still hadn't returned to the village. Since I had some matters to attend to in Pingyang City, I decided to visit you. Since your injuries have healed, a few more days won't make a difference. You might as well recuperate in the escort agency before returning." Zhang Xiaohua said embarrassedly, "Elder sister Qiu Tong, and elder sister village head, you guys are so good to me. I've only been working at the village for a month and I've already stopped. I'm still recuperating here. You guys must have delayed all your work at the village. I'm really sorry. Chiu Tong smiled and said, It's all right. We all treat you as a cute little brother. Although the village head hasn't met you, she is a kind and soft-hearted person. You came out at such a young age and even got injured. How could she blame you? Moreover, Lu Er came back a month after you got injured. You didn't delay any work at the village. Ah? Zhang Xiaohua exclaimed. Lu Er came back. Then can I still return to the village? Don't tell me you guys don't want me anymore. Chiu Tong smiled and said, That won't happen. Xiaohua, third Uncle Chu has already spoken to the village head. You can stay at Huanxi village in the future, and don't have to go anywhere. Moreover, there are many things to do at the village. Even if you don't do Lu Er's work, you can still do other things. The village head will definitely want you. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua patted her chest and said, That was close. I got injured and no one wants me anymore. That would be a huge loss. I was lucky. Chiu Tong glanced at Li Jifeng and said, It's all thanks to your brotherly. Actually, you are no longer the same as before. You can read and write so well. You can live anywhere. Of course, in the village, you have the protection of the village head. Of course, it's much better than outside. If the village head knows that you can read, she will be very happy. That's why you have to thank this teacher of yours. Zhang Xiaohua said seriously. Sister Chiu Tong is right. Brother Li is so good to me. I really have nothing to say. It's just that I can't repay you. I can only wait for the future. Li Jinfeng evaded and said, Xiaohua, you don't have to be like this. Being able to teach you is also satisfying my desire to be a teacher. Being able to show off in front of others as a teacher is also an opportunity you gave me. I won't thank you and you won't thank me. Don't even mention the word repay in the future. Chiu Tong looked at Li Jifeng and felt that this person's words were quite interesting. He didn't seem like the vulgar people she usually met. Then she said to Zhang Xiaohua, Xiaohua, I haven't seen you in a few months. Why has your voice changed? It used to be a little soft, but now it's a little hoarse and low. Could it be that this injury and the internal injuries in your body haven't been treated yet? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. She raised her head and carefully said, Then, she said in confusion, There's no change, Sister Chiu Tong. Chiu Tong smiled and said, If there's no change, why didn't I hear it when we were outside? Zhang Xiaohua scratched her head and said, The doctor in the clinic didn't say that there was an internal injury. I heard from Yu Dai that his internal energy didn't rush into my meridians. He only injured my fist. At this moment, Li Jinfeng interrupted and said, Well, Miss Chiu Tong, young people will change their voices when they are in their teens. In the past, it can be called a child's voice. It's very sharp. Xiaohua is changing her voice now and it's a little hoarse. After a while, her voice will be fixed and she won't be able to speak as loudly as before. However, Xiaohua's voice sounds pretty good. It's quite magnetic. Chiu Tong smiled and said, Mr. Li is really knowledgeable. You even know these things. Li Jinfeng's face was slightly red. He said humbly, These are all things that I read in books. I only dabbled a little and understood them after putting them into practice. I don't dare to claim credit. Chiu Tong's impression of him improved when she saw him like this. Then, Chiu Tong asked again, Xiaohua, when will your injury recover? Let me calculate the time. The next time I come to Pingyang City for business, I'll bring you back with me. Zhang Xiaohua thought about it and said, Actually, we can go back now. However, I don't think the doctor at the escort agency will agree. I think it should be fine in about 10 days. When Chiu Tong heard this, she said readily, All right then, I'll come and fetch you in 10 days. Anyway, the manor has many things to do in Pingyang City. Even if I don't come, they'll send someone else. However, Li Jinfeng said, Miss Chiu Tong, Xiaohua's injury may not recover in time. Why don't we wait for him to recover? I'll send him over with his second brother. That way, you won't have to worry about coming over to fetch him. Chiu Tong felt that it made sense. She said, That's good too. If I can make it in 10 days, I'll come and fetch him. If not, you can send Xiaohua over to see the environment of the manor. Don't worry about Xiaohua. After speaking, they chatted for a while more before Chiu Tong took her leave. Zhang Xiaohua insisted on getting off the Kong bed. She walked her to the door and watched reluctantly as Chiu Tong turned into the corridor. When Chiu Tong was far away, Zhang Xiaohua turned and went back into the house. When she entered the house, she realized that Li Jifeng did not follow her in. She turned around and saw that this fellow was still staring blankly at the empty corridor. He seemed to be thinking about something. Zhang Xiaohua shouted, "Brother Li, what are you doing? Did you meet someone you know again?" Li Jifeng turned around and smiled at Zhang Xiaohua. He said, "What do you mean by someone I know? Everyone in this escort agency is a martial artist. Not many of them will take a liking to a weak scholar like me. How can I make friends?" As he spoke, he held Zhang Xiaohua's right hand and carefully helped him onto the Kong bed. "Please add it to your collection." "Thank you." 0. Chapter 104. He waited for Zhang Xiaohua to settle down before asking with a grin, "Xiaohua, are you very familiar with this Chiu Tong?" Zhang Xiaohua said, "Of course, it was big sister Chiu Tong who told me to go to Huanxi Mountain Villa. Of course we're very familiar with each other." "Then how old is Chiu Tong? Where is she from? Is there anyone else in her family? Also, is she married?" Li Jifeng asked a long list of questions in a row. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and mumbled, "We are familiar with each other, but we've only met 2 or 3 times. I'm really not too sure about the questions you're asking. Why don't I help you ask big sister Chiu Tong the next time I see her?" Li Jifeng put his index finger in the middle of his mouth and made a sh sound, saying, "It's too embarrassing to ask her these things in person. When you have time, you can find a chance to slowly ask her. However, you have to be careful not to let her know that it's me who wants to ask, okay?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and asked, "Why? It's what you want to know in the first place. Why do you have to be so secretive?" Li Jifeng clasped his hands behind his back and looked out the window, saying, "Guan Guan Jujiu, in the continent of the river, a gentle and graceful lady is a good match for a gentleman. Xiaohua, you're still young. When you grow up, you'll know for yourself." Zhang Xiaohua was confused and asked, "Where did this saying come from? Why haven't I heard of it before?" Li Jifeng smiled and said, "Xiaohua, there are so many books in this world that we can barely read 10% of them in our entire lives. That's why there's no end to learning, but there's a limit to my heart. Only by reading more and reading more books can I keep up with the pace of the times. This saying is from a legendary song in a book. When you have the chance to read it, you'll naturally know the specific meaning. Even if I tell you now, you won't understand." Zhang Xiaohua pursed her lips, but she agreed with him in her heart. She had only learned for a few days, but Li Jifeng had been studying for decades. Of course, his knowledge and experience could not be compared to hers. At this stage, whatever he said was the truth. There was no way she could argue with him. They were not on the same level after all. The two of them chatted for a while. Li Jifeng would intentionally or unintentionally ask Zhang Xiaohua about Chiu Tong. Unfortunately, ever since Zhang Xiaohua arrived at Huanxi Manor, she had not seen Chiu Tong once. All she knew were some trivial things that she heard from others. Even so, these were still very interesting to Li Jifeng. Later on, Li Jifeng suddenly thought of something and asked Zhang Xiaohua, "Xiaohua, you've only been in Pingyang City for a few days. How did you suddenly get to know Chiu Tong? I've been in Pingyang City for much longer than you. Why didn't I have this opportunity?" Zhang Xiaohua recounted how she met Chiu Tong. Li Jifeng sighed and said, "You even got such a good opportunity. If only it were me. I would definitely be able to bring that thief to Chiu Tong." Zhang Xiaohua pursed her lips again and said, "If it were you, where would my rice bowl be? A guy who only has the opposite sex but no friends. You even have to scheme against someone's livelihood. Moreover, with your character, how can you catch a thief? If it weren't for me that day, you wouldn't have known that your money pouch had been stolen. When Li Jinfeng heard this, his eyes couldn't help but light up. He said, "In that case, Chiu Tong and I both met a thief. It was also because of you that our money pouches didn't go missing. It seems that Chiu Tong and I are really fated." Looking at Li Jinfeng's extremely narcissistic look, Zhang Xiaohua rolled her eyes. At this point, even if Zhang Xiaohua thought with her heels, she knew that Li Jinfeng was very interested in Chiu Tong. However, this was the first time Zhang Xiaohua had seen someone like Li Jinfeng who forcefully pulled fate together. It was probably the first time in Pingyang City as well. If this was also fate, then Yu Lao's red string was too worthless. At night, Zhang Xiaohu returned. Zhang Xiaohua told him about what happened today. Zhang Xiaohu was very happy and felt as if a rock had been lifted from his heart. Previously, the third Master Chu had promised Huanxi Manor. However, as long as Zhang Xiaohua didn't receive news from the manor, he naturally wouldn't feel at ease. He had also met Chiu Tong before. She was the one who brought Zhang Xiaohua to Huanxi Manor. Zhang Xiaohu still believed Chiu Tong's words very much. For the next few days, although Zhang Xiaohua was still lying on the Kong bed to recuperate, she felt as if a cat was scratching her heart. She didn't want to stay on the Kong bed anymore and kept thinking about returning to the manor. She wasn't even in the mood to read the books that Li Jinfeng brought her. Zhang Xiaohu was also a little frustrated. After all, the cultivation of internal energy was not as easy to see the results as practicing fist techniques. He had been studying internal energy for such a long time, but he still hadn't reached the threshold. Naturally, he couldn't calm down. Therefore, when the two brothers were in the room, they couldn't help but stare at each other. After a period of boredom, Zhang Xiaohua asked Zhang Xiaohu, "Second brother, why don't I go back to Huanxi Manor first? After staying in the escort agency for a few months, I haven't even left this room much. I'm tired of it. No matter what, I know some people in the manor. It's also a big place, like our Guizhuang house. Anyway, I can move now, so I'm not afraid of hurting my bones again. I can't move anymore." Zhang Xiaohu thought for a moment and nodded. "That's good. It's not interesting to see you being absent-minded here. Tomorrow, I'll find the doctor in the medical hall to take a final look and then send you back." "That's right, I heard you say that the carriage company has carriages. After the doctor is done, we'll find that carriage company and get a carriage to send you back." Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, "Second brother, I heard from my roommate Ma Jing that this carriage doesn't seem cheap. I think I'd better walk back myself. After all, I haven't moved for a long time. It's good to walk." "That's right, this is my monthly salary for working in Huanxi Manor. Take it first and give it to father and mother when you have time." As she spoke, Zhang Xiaohua took out the money that she had been carrying for several months and handed it to Zhang Xiaohu. She continued, "The main purpose of coming to the escort agency this time was to see you and give this money to you. In the end, I ended up staying here for several months. It's really fate that makes fools of people." Zhang Xiaohu looked at the money in his younger brother's small hands and felt sour in his heart. He didn't know what to say. After a long time, he finally opened his mouth. "Xiaohua, take this money first. It's inconvenient to be outside compared to being at home. You're alone in the manor, and I'm not by your side. There are many places where you need money. You should also buy more things for yourself. Father and mother at home want you to be healthy and live a good life. You can only take care of yourself first, and then consider giving it to them." Zhang Xiaohua insisted on putting the money into Zhang Xiaohu's hands, saying, "It's all right, second brother. I don't leave the manor. Everything is ready-made there. I don't need to buy food or clothes myself. What else do I need to buy? Besides, this is the first time I've received my monthly allowance. It's very important, and has a very important meaning. I must give it to father and mother. They've worked very hard to raise me. This money is a symbol of my growth and is also my filial piety to them." Zhang Xiaohu smiled and said, "This Li Jinfeng is really not bad. He's taught you to be refined and refined. When you speak, there are many reasons. Since you've said so, I'll take it first. When there's a chance, I'll have someone else bring it back. However, you've just recovered from a serious illness, so it's best that you don't tire yourself out. I've already received my monthly allowance from the escort agency for several months. I'll pay for you to take that carriage back. However, Zhang Xiaohua wasn't willing and tried to refuse. Zhang Xiaohu felt sorry for his younger brother and persisted. Even when they were about to go to sleep, there was still no result. The next day, early in the morning, Zhang Xiaohua had Zhang Xiaohu bring her to the medical hall and let the old physician take a look. The physician carefully looked at her and then wrapped her in a bandage. He smiled and said to Zhang Xiaohua, "The bones are growing very neatly and have recovered very well. Moreover, the recovery time was unexpectedly short. It seems that you've been stifled for a long time. From today onwards, you can move your right hand freely. However, you mustn't use too much strength at first. For the time being, it's just a normal extension and contraction. Remember, don't use your right hand to lift heavy objects. When you're working, try your best to use your left hand. Oh right, try your best to use your right hand when you're eating." Zhang Xiaohua anxiously asked. "Then when can I practice boxing?" The physician looked at Zhang Xiaohua's expectant gaze and then looked at Zhang Xiaohu. He kindly said, You can move your right hand first. After a few days, when this bandage is removed, you can try to practice boxing. However, you must remember that practicing boxing is only to strengthen your body. Being competitive is not the purpose of practicing boxing. In the future, you must try your best not to compete with others or cause trouble." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. What was the point of practicing boxing if he wasn't going to fight? However, he still nodded as if he didn't fully understand. Zhang Xiaohua happily followed Zhang Xiaohu back. As he walked, he eagerly wanted to move his arm. Zhang Xiaohu hurriedly stopped him and said, "Although the physician has already allowed you to move, there should be a limit. Don't move so much. Try to move as little as possible first. Wait a while before practicing your boxing." "Oh right, I think that young Master Li's words make sense. Why don't you read more books? Maybe practicing is more interesting?" Zhang Xiaohu still tried to persuade Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly walked quietly and replied disapprovingly, "Practicing is boring. Although those books look interesting, if you study them every day, it's boring. I still want to practice boxing and practice internal strength." Zhang Xiaohu said, What internal strength? Let's not talk about how you don't know where you can learn internal strength techniques. I've been practicing this internal strength technique for so long and haven't made any progress. Practicing martial arts is too difficult." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Second brother, didn't you always say that as long as you work hard, an iron pestle can be ground into a needle? Why are you saying such discouraging words now?" Zhang Xiaohu smiled bitterly and said, "That depends on what kind of iron it is. Let's not talk about it anymore. Maybe when the time comes, you'll know how difficult it is. If I say it now, you won't believe me. However, since you insist on practicing martial arts, then you must do it step by step. Slowly move your right hand. When the time is right, then you can start practicing boxing." As the two talked, they returned to the small room. At this time, there was someone waiting in front of Zhang Xiaohu's room. When he saw Zhang Xiaohu return, he hurriedly said, "Zhang Xiaohu, where did you run off to? Sixth Master Li is anxiously looking for you." It seemed that the person was in a hurry. Zhang Xiaohu didn't have time to say anything to Zhang Xiaohua. He only told him not to go back to the villa and to wait for him to come back. Zhang Xiaohua wanted to leave by himself, but when he saw his second brother's glare, he obediently waited in the room. Just as he was bored waiting, he heard someone shout from outside, Zhang Xiaohua, where are you?" When Zhang Xiaohua heard this familiar voice, he happily jumped down from the Kong bed. Before he left the room, he loudly replied, "I'm here, brother Ma, I'm here." It turned out that the person outside was Zhang Xiaohua's roommate Ma Jing. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua hadn't seen this roommate of his for several months. He even threw some of the resentment in his heart to the back of his mind and rushed out of the room. When he reached the door, Ma Jing also followed the sound and came over. When he saw Zhang Xiaohua come out of the room, he was very happy. He went forward to hold Zhang Xiaohua's right hand. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua was already used to using his left hand, so naturally, he reached out his left hand. Ma Jing was stunned and quickly changed his hand. When Zhang Xiaohua understood, the scene of him scratching his feet immediately appeared in his mind. However, it was too late. His left hand had already been enthusiastically grabbed by Ma Jing's hand. His right hand also very naturally patted Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder. Zhang Xiaohua didn't know whether to withdraw his hand or his shoulder. He only heard Ma Jing enthusiastically say, "Brother, long time no see. I miss you a lot. How did your voice become so nice? You actually chased after me. You have a bit of my style in the past." Zhang Xiaohua withdrew his hand and wanted to let Ma Jing into the room, but Ma Jing held his hand tightly. Without waiting for him to speak, he continued, "Brother, did you know that day? I was thinking about going back to the manor to lead the way for you, so I went back before it was midnight. When I didn't see you at the entrance of the manor, I thought you went back to your room. However, I didn't see you at the entrance of the manor either, so I felt strange. You said that if you didn't go back, I wouldn't have to go back so early. Shout out. Oh, I'll wait for you at the entrance of the manor for a while. Otherwise, you won't be able to find a place to stay when you come back at night. Moreover, you still didn't come back the next day, so I missed you even more. AI, brother, she is also right. Although we're roommates, you can't let me do all your work alone. In any case, you should let others share some of your work, right? Without you, I'm so tired. I've been waiting for you like the stars and the moon. However, I heard from Brother Shi that your hand was injured. I'm going to faint. You can't let me do all your work, right? Fortunately, Brother Shi still has some humanity, and didn't let me do all of it. However, compared to before, it's also more tiring. Look at how thin I've become. This is the after effect of that time." Zhang Xiaohua smiled apologetically and said, "Brother Ma, it's really been hard on you. Little brother apologizes. In the future, little brother will admire Brother Ma more." After saying this, he took the opportunity to pull out his left hand. However, as soon as he pulled it out, Ma Jing held it even more passionately. Ma Jing said with tears in his eyes, "Brother, you can see it too? However, don't admire Brother Shi. Brother Shi only has this shortcoming of taking pleasure in helping others." Zhang Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He could only stretch out his left hand and let Ma Jing hold it. However, he secretly swore in his heart, "In a while I must wash my hands 8 to 10 times. Moreover, I must practice my body movements well. Next time, I definitely won't let Ma Jing get close to me." Then Ma Jing talked about the trivial matters of the life of the people in the villa, as well as the trivial quarrels. It was a pity that Zhang Xiaohua only wanted to wash her hands. He was just playing the lute to a cow and casting pearls before swine. Finally, Ma Jing made a concluding statement. "Fortunately, after you were injured for a month, my closest comrade and roommate, Lu Er, came back and saved me from the sea of labor. Oh right, you haven't seen Lu Er yet, right? Come here, let me introduce you." After saying this, he pulled Zhang Xiaohua's hand and stepped aside, revealing a short and honest figure behind him. Ma Jing's figure was not tall, but this fat man was actually shorter than Ma Jing. It was no wonder that Ma Jing blocked him and Zhang Xiaohua couldn't see him. However, this person's height was not as tall as Ma Jing, but his body was almost twice as fat as Ma Jing. Thinking about the food in Huanxi Villa, Zhang Xiaohua somewhat understood. Zhang Xiaohua quickly took the opportunity to pull her hand out and saluted the short and fat Lu Er, saying, "Lu Er Ge, I've heard of your name for a long time, but I didn't meet you until today." That Lu Er also returned the salute and said in a very low voice, "Zhang Xiaohua, how are you? Have you recovered from your injury?" Zhang Xiaohua said, "Thank you for your concern, Lu Er Ge. I'm much better now." Then Zhang Xiaohua said to the two of them, "Two big brothers, please come in and sit." Ma Jing stopped walking and looked at the sky, saying, "Xiaohua, it's already late. We didn't come here to see you. Zhang Xiaohua was disappointed and said, Why are you leaving so soon? Why don't you sit and chat for a while? When my second brother comes back, I'll go with you. Anyway, my injury has recovered and I'm discussing with my second brother about going back to the villa. Ma Jing continued, Yes, I didn't come here to see you. I came out to do some business and bring you back to the villa while I'm at it. Ma Jing emphasized the word, see. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she suddenly understood. AI, this Ma Jing's habits never changed. Zhang Xiaohua said, How about this, Ma Ge, Luer Ge, you two go into the house first. I'll go find my second brother and let him know. I'll go with you two immediately. When the two heard this, they entered the house. However, when the two of them entered the house and Zhang Xiaohua walked out of the small courtyard, she realized that she didn't know where to look for Zhang Xiaohu. There were many people in the escort agency and the place was big. Zhang Xiaohua wasn't so stupid as to think that everyone in the agency would know Zhang Xiaohu. She had a vague impression of the martial arts center, but today, Zhang Xiaohu had been called away by 6th Master Li. She didn't know where the guards were, so she could only return to the house for the time being. When she returned to the house, Ma Jing asked, How come you're done talking to your second brother so quickly? Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly and said, Not yet. I don't know where my second brother went either. I'd better pack up first or write him a note later. Ma Jing was stunned and said, You know how to write? I remember that you don't know how to read. Zhang Xiaohua said proudly, Ma Ge, a scholar who has been away for 3 days must be looked at with new eyes. Moreover, we haven't seen each other for more than 3 months. Don't tell me I can't write? Ma Jing said enviously. Xiaohua, you're not lying to your brother, right? No matter how I look at you, you don't look like someone who can write in 3 months. Zhang Xiaohua said as she packed up. All right then. After I pack up, I'll perform for you. Let's see if I can write or not. Please bookmark it, thank you. 0. Chapter 105. At this moment, Luer, who had been silent for a long time, spoke up. We're not literate either. Who knows what you're writing? Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and thought. Yeah, second brother isn't literate either. He won't understand what I'm writing. However, she immediately changed her mind. If she didn't know, she could ask someone else. This wasn't a difficult thing to do, so she didn't stop. Zhang Xiaohua didn't have many things. When she came a few months ago, she wanted to stay at the escort agency for a while before returning to the villa. She didn't bring anything at all. Now, she only packed some books and miscellaneous items. She finished packing in no time. Thus, under the watchful eyes of Ma Jing and Luer, she skillfully spread out the paper and was about to look for a pen when she felt someone walk out of the house. She looked up and saw Zhang Xiaohu push the door open and enter. Zhang Xiaohua's senses were very sensitive now. Zhang Xiaohu walked out of the house with extremely light footsteps. Ma Jing and Luer didn't hear it, but Zhang Xiaohua could clearly feel it. Zhang Xiaohu pushed the door open and entered. Seeing a stranger in the house, he couldn't help but be startled. Zhang Xiaohua quickly introduced them to each other. Zhang Xiaohu quickly bowed and said, Brother Ma, thank you for taking care of Xiaohua in the villa. Ma Jing also returned the greeting and said, Brother Zhang, you're welcome. Xiaohua is young and can be considered our little brother. It's only right to take care of him. Zhang Xiaohua was the only one who cursed in her heart. Taking care of her was rare, but little shoes were endless. After Zhang Xiaohua explained the purpose of their visit, Zhang Xiaohu's face lit up and said, You two came at the right time. I originally wanted to send Xiaohua to the villa, but I was called over by 6th Master Li early in the morning. It turns out that there is an escort mission that requires us to go out today, and we don't have time. You two coming has fulfilled my wish. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she asked anxiously, Second brother, where are these darts going? Is there any danger? This is your first trip out, so you must be very careful. Zhang Xiaohu smiled and said, I can't tell you the exact location. This is the rules of the escort agency. However, it shouldn't be a problem. The place we're heading to is very close. Not only is it my first time going there, but the agency has also sent out most of the newbies who haven't been out before for the sake of training. They even made me the vice captain, so it shouldn't be too dangerous. Moreover, there's also a highly skilled and experienced bodyguard, Captain Ren, who will guide us. You can rest assured. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua was slightly relieved. When Ma Jing saw that Zhang Xiaohua's small bundle had been packed and the two brothers were still reluctant to part, he said to Zhang Xiaohu, "It's getting late. Brother Zhang, we still have to rush back to the villa before noon. We can't stay here any longer. We'll take Zhang Xiaohua back now. If you have time, you can come to our villa to play." When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he agreed and said, "Brother Ma is right. It's right to hurry back to the villa and complete the mission. Let's go, I'll send you out." After saying this, he picked up the small bundle on the Kong bed and invited Ma Jing and Lu Ertu to go first. The carriage of Huanxi Villa was parked at the entrance of the escort agency. It was the same carriage that Qiu Tong used to take Zhang Xiaohua to the villa. Zhang Xiaohu stood in front of the carriage and looked at his younger brother. During this period of rest, Zhang Xiaohua had put on a lot of weight. His face was a little puffy and he didn't grow any taller. However, when he saw that his hands were still wrapped, he still felt a burst of bitterness. Zhang Xiaohu put the small bundle on the carriage and reminded him, "Remember what the doctor said just now. Do some restorative activities first. Don't do any heavy work. If you're not careful and your bones crack again, it'll be big trouble." Zhang Xiaohua was a little impatient when he heard this and said, "I know, second brother. You've said it many times. Didn't I also tell you about the work in the villa? It's not tiring. Anyway, I can use my left hand very well. If I can't do it, I'll use my left hand. Actually, I just want to practice my fist techniques earlier. Since the doctor won't let me do it now, I'll wait a few days." Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua didn't want to listen anymore, and that he had said enough today, perhaps saying more would make him suspicious, Zhang Xiaohu smiled and nodded. He then said to Ma Jing and Lu Er, "Xiaohua's injuries have healed. However, the doctor said that he can't fully use his right hand for the time being. Please take care of the villa. This one thanks you in advance." After saying this, he bowed deeply. Ma Jing and Lu Ertu hurriedly returned the bow and agreed. Then, the three of them got into the carriage. The carriage slowly started and sped away. Zhang Xiaohu stood in front of the escort agency and waved his hand continuously. It wasn't until the carriage disappeared from sight and Zhang Xiaohua's small waving hand could no longer be seen that he turned around and entered the agency. On the way, Ma Jing pulled Zhang Xiaohua aside and asked him all sorts of questions. When he heard Zhang Xiaohu repeatedly tell Zhang Xiaohua not to practice his fist techniques, he was very puzzled. He remembered that when Zhang Xiaohua first arrived, didn't he say that he didn't know martial arts? How did he know how to practice his fist techniques? When Zhang Xiaohua was practicing his fist techniques with He Tianshu at the villa, he didn't intend to avoid Ma Jing and the others. Unfortunately, the green-clothed and hat-wearing people were from two different worlds from the Misty School's disciples. Usually, they only interacted with each other during meals and rest. Other than that, they didn't interfere with each other. In fact, the green-clothed and hat-wearing people had a faint sense of inferiority, and didn't set foot in the Misty School's disciples' area of activity. Zhang Xiaohua naturally didn't know about this. After he entered the villa, he ate and worked with Ma Jing and the others. Other than that, he spent his free time with He Tianshu and the others. Therefore, Ma Jing didn't know anything about Zhang Xiaohua learning fist techniques. Now that Ma Jing asked, Zhang Xiaohua told him everything in detail. Ma Jing was very puzzled, but more than that, he felt admiration. Although he didn't say it out loud, he was muttering in his heart. With his aptitude and handsome appearance, why didn't He Tianshu take a fancy to him? Could it be that the heavens were jealous of his handsome appearance? Perhaps he should still sigh at his luck. He even thought about whether he should express his goodwill to the Misty School's disciples at breakfast tomorrow. After knowing that Zhang Xiaohua could perform a few fist techniques, Ma Jing was even more curious about how he was injured at the escort agency. After Zhang Xiaohua finished explaining the situation, Ma Jing immediately dismissed the idea of practicing martial arts and put away his goodwill. Tomorrow, he would still be hostile. What a joke! Why would he practice fist techniques? He had only been practicing for a month and had only learned a few moves before he was beaten to death. If he were to practice martial arts, he would definitely be better than Zhang Xiaohua. Then, wouldn't he be beaten to death with a single palm strike? He thought about what Zhang Xiaohua said. His second brother, Zhang Xiaohu, was 10 times stronger than him. Wasn't he also beaten to a pulp by Yu Dai and almost lost his life? He was still wise to not walk the path of martial arts. He patted his chest and was secretly happy that he had embarked on a career with a bright future. The honest Lu Er beside him only listened and occasionally smiled to express his agreement. He faithfully performed all the actions that a minor character should do. The carriage arrived at Huanxi Manor in a short while. They entered through the side door as usual. The carriage stopped at the side door and waited for the guard to inspect it. Ma Jing and Lu Er were not like Chiu Tong. They didn't need any waste tokens and could even bring strangers into the manor. They obediently took out their waste tokens and handed them over. Then, the guard looked at Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and then patted her forehead. Yes, she had received a waste token when she left the manor a few months ago. Naturally, she had to return that waste token now. However, where did she put that waste token? She hadn't used it for a long time and seemed to have forgotten about it. She seemed to have used it as a paperweight when she was learning to read and write from Li Jifeng. She didn't pay attention to whether she had put it in when she was packing her bag. The small bag had to be knotted. Knots were easy to tie, but difficult to untie. Zhang Xiaohua's left hand and injured right hand were very difficult to untie. Ma Jing was at the side and naturally took over the bag and helped untie it. Zhang Xiaohua flipped through the things inside. Sure enough, she found the missing waste token among a few books. She picked it up and casually handed it to Ma Jing. Ma Jing didn't care and casually glanced at it. He turned around and was about to hand it to the guard. Just as he was about to reach out, he suddenly thought of something and said, "Eh?" He retracted his hand and carefully looked at the waste token. He looked at it up and down, left and right. Then, he frowned and asked, "Zhang Xiaohua, why is your waste token different from ours?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. She took the waste token and looked at it carefully. She said, "This is it. I don't have any other waste tokens, only this one. It should have been given when I left the manor last time. Could it be that this waste token doesn't belong to our manor? It's broken. Did I lose it?" Ma Jing was also stunned. He said, "This waste token should belong to our manor. It's similar to ours. Also, it looks familiar to me. I think I've seen it somewhere before." Zhang Xiaohua asked. "Why? There are many types of waste tokens in the manor?" Ma Jing said. "Yes, according to the work they do, everyone's waste tag is different. Just like Nier and the others who are next to us." I remember now. When Nier first came here, he went to Pingyang City with me. His waste tag was like this. At that time, I even held 2 waste tokens and compared them. That's why yours looks more familiar. How can you hold this kind of waste token?" Zhang Xiaohua said with a bitter smile. "Brother Ma, this is also my first time holding a waste token. How would I know the reason?" "You might as well ask the guard." Ma Jing heard and felt that it made sense. He handed the waste token to the guard. The guard took it and carefully checked it. After registering it, he kept it. At this moment, Ma Jing went up to him and asked, "Brother guard, can I ask you a question?" That guard nodded. Ma Jing asked, "Brother guard, can you tell me why this little brother of mine can receive this kind of waste token?" When the guard heard this, he laughed as if he was looking at an idiot. He replied, "I don't know either. I'm only in charge of verifying if it's a real waste token and letting people enter the manor. As for who uses what waste token, I don't care. You have to go to the front and ask the person who gives out the waste tokens." Ma Jing was unhappy when he heard this. What was the difference between this and not saying anything? However, he didn't dare to show his dissatisfaction. He put on a fake smile and thanked the guard. That guard didn't say anything. He waved his hand and let the horse carriage enter the manor. He slandered in his heart. I know you're unhappy. You say thank you, but who knows what you're saying about me in your heart? The horse carriage dropped the three people at the entrance of the small courtyard and went elsewhere. Zhang Xiaohua got off the car and looked at the familiar outer sect. He sighed with emotion. Time flew by and people changed. He hadn't seen them for a few months, but he had many feelings. When he first arrived, he was like a child, unfamiliar with this place. In a month, he had entered and exited the outer sect countless times, as well as the empty space beside the outer sect. He was covered in sweat and had dozens of incomplete moves. Then, he went out alone, and in the blink of an eye several months had passed. When he looked back, he was already injured. Fate made fools of people. Fate was cruel. Carrying his small bag, Zhang Xiaohua followed Ma Jing and Lu Er into the courtyard. It was already noon, but the others hadn't come back yet. The courtyard was quiet. Zhang Xiaohua was a little absent-minded. He followed the two into the small house. Then, he threw the bag on the Kong bed that he used to live in and sat down casually. However, he soon found that Ma Jing was looking at him strangely. Lu Er was also looking at him uncharacteristically and laughing foolishly. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but be stunned. He looked down at his body and then at his feet. He didn't step on dog shit. What was there to see? But when he raised his head and looked around, he couldn't help but jump down from the Kong bed. It turned out that the Kong bed had been replaced with a different bedding. The things on the small table on the Kong bed were also different. Zhang Xiaohua then remembered that before he came to the mountain villa, Lu Er was in the same room as Ma Jing. Since he came back and he wasn't in the mountain villa, Lu Er naturally continued to live in the original room and Kong bed. He didn't care and made others laugh. Zhang Xiaohua blushed and was about to say something when Lu Er quickly said, It's okay. Zhang Xiaohua, if you're tired, sit on the Kong bed for a while. You just recovered from your injury, so you should pay more attention. Zhang Xiaohua was touched. What a good person. It was rare to see someone like him in green. Lu Er continued to say, If you're used to sleeping on this Kong bed, I'll go find Brother Shi and have him arrange a room for me. You can stay with Brother Ma. Zhang Xiaohua woke up as if struck by lightning. He quickly waved his hand and said, Don't. A gentleman doesn't take what others love. Since it's Brother Lu Er's original Kong bed, I naturally have to give it up. There's no way for me to continue sleeping there. It's better for me to go out and find another place. Lu Er said, I'm used to sleeping anywhere. You're an injured patient. It's better for you to stay in the original place. The power of habit is endless. It's also beneficial for your recovery. Thus, the two of them fought over the Kong bed. They both wanted to give the best Kong bed to each other. Ma Jing, who was watching from the side, sighed with emotion. They were both good people. It's also because of my good character that the people who live with me can be influenced to become gentlemen. Just as the two of them were arguing, a burst of noise came from the courtyard. Presumably, Tian Zhongxi and the others had returned. Zhang Xiaohua happily ran out of the small house. It wasn't only to escape Lu Er's enthusiasm, but also to see these Tian friends that she had struggled with for a month. When Zhang Xiaohua appeared in the courtyard, the green-clothed people were very surprised. They all surrounded her and asked her all sorts of questions. In fact, Zhang Xiaohua wasn't that familiar with them. Moreover, in this short month, she hadn't really integrated into their circle. It was only a few months that they hadn't seen each other, so everyone felt a sense of novelty. Moreover, they had heard that this Zhang Xiaohua had actually been injured in a martial arts competition and had almost lost her life. Naturally, they were very curious. One of them said, Zhang Xiaohua, I heard that you challenged that strong man of the Lotus Flower Escort Agency. He flew into a rage out of humiliation and heavily injured you with one slap. Is that true? Another one asked. Zhang Xiaohua, I heard that you fought with 12 experts of the escort agency in a row and finally died of exhaustion. Is that true? Another one said. Zhang Xiaohua, I heard that you were bewitched by the female escort of the Lotus Flower Escort Agency. She even used the yin-yang harmony powder to knock you down. You are our idol. That's right, how was that female escort's figure? When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she felt a burst of dizziness. What was going on? She originally wanted to tell them in detail, but she suddenly didn't have the strength to say a single word. She could only smile and respond with a yi and ah. Tian Zhongxi, on the other hand, stood outside the circle with a calm expression. No one knew what he was thinking about. When everyone had made enough noise, he put on a stern face and scolded. Everyone disperse. Zhang Xiaohua is back. If you want to know anything, there will be plenty of opportunities and time to ask in the future. She hasn't fully recovered yet. If you guys bump into her, be careful that you guys have to pay Zhang Xiaohua's medical fees. These words were really effective. The group of people in green immediately distanced themselves from Zhang Xiaohua. Even if Zhang Xiaohua were to fall down now, they definitely wouldn't have to bear any responsibility. Tian Zhongxi continued. Hurry up and tidy up to eat. After that, there's still a lot of work to do in the afternoon. If you delay, don't blame me for docking your wages. These words were even more effective. Who would want to refuse their own wages? They immediately dispersed and returned to their own rooms. Their warm feelings of concern immediately vanished like smoke in thin air. Tian Zhongxi looked at Zhang Xiaohua, who was surprised by everyone's quick actions, and said, Zhang Xiaohua, come with me. After that, he didn't wait for him and walked back to his own room. Zhang Xiaohua felt strange when she saw Tian Zhongxi's indifferent attitude towards her. However, now was not the time to think about it. Seeing that Tian Zhongxi was about to enter the room, she quickly followed him. Tian Zhongxi walked into the room and turned to look at Zhang Xiaohua, who ran into the room. He said in a flat tone, Zhang Xiaohua, how's your injury? Zhang Xiaohua looked at Tian Zhongxi carefully and said, It's okay, brother Shi. Although I haven't fully recovered, I can work with my left hand. It won't affect the work assigned to us by the villa. Tian Zhongxi said, Hee, this is not under my control. I'm relieved that your injury has recovered. After all, you used to be my little brother. If anything happened to you, I wouldn't feel good. These words were strange. Zhang Xiaohua still didn't understand. However, Tian Zhongxi pointed to a pile of bedding on the idol Kong and said, That's your bedding. See if there's anything missing. Then follow me. I'll arrange a place for you to live in the future. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she was like a monkey whose tail was burned. She immediately jumped up and said, Brother Shi, please, don't arrange for me to live in Brother Ma's room again. Please, please. 0. Chapter 106. Tian Zhongxi looked at Zhang Xiaohua's fawning face and couldn't help but smile. He said, Bring me the bedding first. It's not up to me to decide where you live. Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled again and asked, Brother Shi, then, who has the final say? Tian Zhongxi ignored her and waved his hand. Come, follow me. You'll know when you get there. After he finished speaking, he pushed the door open and walked out with a deep look on his face. Zhang Xiaohua was confused. She had to take the bedding and follow Tian Zhongxi out. Tian Zhongxi went out and turned left. It was in the direction of Ma Jing's house. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but feel a little nervous. Moreover, Tian Zhongxi's footsteps stopped in front of Ma Jing's house. Zhang Xiaohua's heartbeat suddenly accelerated. She complained in her heart. He said he wouldn't let me live in this house. It turned out that he was tricking me. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't see Tian Zhongxi's face, but there was a smile on his face. The corners of his mouth were also upturned. It seemed that he was playing. When Zhang Xiaohua's heart jumped to her throat, he moved forward again. The pitiful Zhang Xiaohua didn't realize that he was being toyed with at all. He let out a long sigh and thanked the gods in his heart. Only then did he cheerfully follow. Tian Zhongxi didn't stop until he reached the end of the row of houses. He knocked on the door. Another voice that Zhang Xiaohua was very familiar with came from the house. Who is it? Come in. This was actually He Tianxu's room. Speaking of the people Zhang Xiaohua wanted to see most in Huanqi Mountain Villa, He Tianxu was definitely one of the candidates. She thought that she could see him after dinner. Who knew that she would meet him in such a situation as soon as she returned to the villa? Zhang Xiaohua followed Tian Zhongxi into the house with the bedding. Seeing the face that she hadn't seen for months, Zhang Xiaohua wanted to cry. This kind of thought didn't arise when he woke up after being injured and saw Zhang Xiaohu. Tian Zhongxi looked at He Tianxu and said, Captain He, I've brought Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua stood alone at the door of the room. She hugged the blanket with her left hand and called out timidly. Captain He. He was like a child who had been bullied. He felt wrong but did not dare to tell his family. He could only swallow his teeth. His eyes were pleading for help, hoping that his family would stand up for him. He Tianxu looked at his stupid disciple and thought about his half-baked and incomplete fist technique. He thought about how he persistently practiced his fist technique in the middle of the night under the moonlight. He thought about how he actually dared to face a powerful opponent and bravely extended his little fist in order to save his brother's life with his right hand. Although He Tianxu did not see it with his own eyes, he could imagine Zhang Xiaohua's stubborn gaze and his determined footsteps even with his eyes closed. He even remembered the horse stance that he had personally taught him. However, He Tianxu didn't take another look at Zhang Xiaohua. He retracted his gaze and smiled at Tian Zhongxi. Okay, sorry to trouble you. Leave it to me. Tian Zhongxi nodded and didn't say anything else. He turned around and walked in front of Zhang Xiaohua. He patted Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder and said, Zhang Xiaohua, from now on, Captain He will be in charge of you. Take care of your body. After he finished speaking, he didn't wait for Zhang Xiaohua to say anything and walked away. Zhang Xiaohua didn't seem to understand what had happened. She just stood there in a daze, not knowing what to do next. Fortunately, at this moment, He Tianxu walked up and asked gently, Zhang Xiaohua, how are your injuries? Zhang Xiaohua came back to her senses. She smiled and said, Captain He, it's nothing serious. I can move around a little. Then Zhang Xiaohua said apologetically, Captain He, I'm sorry. He Tianxu was stunned and asked, Sorry? Why? Zhang Xiaohua said strangely, I was injured during the competition. Naturally, I lost face for you. However, you can punish me however you want. Just don't expel me from the sect. He Tianxu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He asked, Who told you this? Zhang Xiaohua said, Isn't it written in the books? Isn't it true? He Tianxu was stunned and asked, Aren't you illiterate? You heard it from someone. Zhang Xiaohua looked up and said proudly, Captain He, I can read now. I can even write. I read all these in books. He Tianxu was even more stunned. He said, In just a few months, you can read and read? Not bad, you're really a good child. Zhang Xiaohua heard He Tianxu's praise and blushed. She said modestly, I didn't learn much. I just learned the Shuowen Jiezi that children use to learn. I also read a few books that they must learn. What? The Shuowen Jiezi that is used to teach children. This time, it was He Tianxu's turn to be confused. You said that you finished learning the Shuowen Jiezi? When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she felt embarrassed and said, Captain He, I was wrong again. I shouldn't have boasted. I know that this is something that children in Pingyang City learn. I won't say it again. He Tianxu fell to the ground with a thud. Then, he flipped himself up and stood steadily in front of Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua looked at him with stars in her eyes. She thought to herself, Idle, idle. What a graceful posture. I don't know when I can learn it. Poor He Tianxu patted his forehead and thought, Shuowen Jiezi, a children's first lesson? Am I having a fever? Then, He Tianxu asked, Where's your first lesson book? Let me see. Zhang Xiaohua then remembered and said hurriedly, Oh, I forgot it in Ma Jing's room. I'll go get it now. With that, she turned and ran out. He Tianshu immediately stopped her and said, There's no need, Zhang Xiaohua. Let's talk about it in the future. Zhang Xiaohua obediently stopped in her tracks. He Tianshu said, Whether you heard it or saw it yourself, you can't take it seriously. First of all, you're not my disciple. I'm only teaching you fist techniques. This is something that's widely spread in the martial arts world. It's not my unique technique. You're not my disciple, so I can't chase you out. Secondly, you did very well this time. Even if I'm your master, I won't blame you. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed and said, Really? Captain He, you also think that I did very well. But I was defeated. I couldn't even take a slap from him. He Tianshu patted her shoulder and said, Silly Hua, you've only learned fist techniques for a few days. How many years did he learn? What kind of fist techniques did you learn? What kind of inner strength mantra did he learn? Although the purple sand palm isn't some profound inner strength mantra, against someone like you who hasn't even seen the shadow of martial arts, it's like an adult against a newborn child. You have nothing to be ashamed of. Oh right, let me take a look at your injuries. He Tianshu held up Zhang Xiaohua's right hand and said, Put the blanket on the chair first. Zhang Xiaohua placed her blanket on the chair next to her and obediently allowed He Tianshu to carefully pinch her fingers. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua's right hand was still wrapped in bandages. He Tianshu didn't unwrap the bandages and only felt them carefully through the bandages. When He Tianshu felt the bones of her right hand's fingers and wrist, he looked at He Tianshu's fluctuating expression and said cheerfully, Captain He, you're recovering well, right? The doctor at the escort agency said that I can't practice fist techniques for the time being and can only do so in a few days. Sigh, I really can't wait. I want to be able to practice the horse stance right now. He Tianshu looked at Zhang Xiaohua's excited expression and wanted to say something but stopped himself. He smiled and said, All right, I'll take a look at your injuries in a few days and we can practice fist techniques together. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed and said, Really, Captain He, you can teach me fist techniques again? Aren't you afraid that I'll forget again? Hearing this, He Tianshu immediately came to his senses and said regretfully, Well, I'll let second brother Nye teach you. When you're almost done learning, I'll teach you then. Zhang Xiaohua said cheerfully, Then I'll definitely learn from second brother Nye so that I won't embarrass Captain He in the next fist technique competition. He Tianshu smiled a little reluctantly and said, All right, I believe you can do it. Then, He Tianshu said, But before you start practicing, I have to arrange a place for you to stay. Oh, didn't brother Shi say? Zhang Xiaohua paused and said incredulously, Captain He, could it be that the person brother Shi was talking about is you? He Tianshu smiled and said, Didn't Tian Shongxi say just now that he's leaving you to me? Didn't you hear him clearly? Or are you so stupid that you can't even understand this? Zhang Xiaohua grinned and said, These things, I'm sometimes confused and sometimes I understand. Of course I know that you're arranging for me, but I can't believe it. I'm just a manservant in the villa. You're a Misty School student who came to the villa to plant herbs. We're not related at all, so how can I be managed by you? This is what I'm puzzled about. He Tianshu scolded with a smile. How do you know that you're a manservant in the Huanxi villa? You didn't come to the Huanxi villa as a manservant, but as a member of the Lotus Escort Agency. You're different from those people who wear green clothes and hats. You hang out with them every day and don't have any awareness of being an escort agency. Think about it, if you were just a manservant, the villa lord might not have let me teach you fist techniques. Zhang Xiaohua finally understood and said, Oh, I know. No wonder the waist tag that was given to me when I went out was different from that of Brother Ma and the others. So it was like this. Yes, it's like this. He Tianshu nodded and said, When you first came, you were indeed replacing Lu Er's work. However, if that's the case, wouldn't it be a waste of the strength of your arms? The villa lord would never let you do ordinary work. You were just there to adapt to the environment. However, plans can't keep up with changes. Before I could adjust for you, you had an accident. I thought that I wouldn't be able to see you again, but it just so happened that the third Master Chu of the escort agency came to the Villa Lord to plead for you. The Villa Lord also took pity on you and put you back into my team. Do you understand? Zhang Xiaohua beamed with joy and said, I understand, Captain He. I'll be in your care in the future. Oh right, I haven't met Sister Villa Lord yet. She's really a good person. I'll have to thank her properly in the future. He Tianshu smiled and rubbed his head, saying, Yes, you should really thank the Villa Lord. She's really good to you. All right, come with me. I'll arrange a room for you first. I still have to go eat. After he finished speaking, He Tianshu picked up the bedding on the chair and was about to leave. Zhang Xiaohua wouldn't let him take it. He quickly used his left hand to snatch the bedding and said, Captain He, I'll take it myself. He Tianshu didn't return it to him and said with a smile, Your hand isn't convenient. I'll take it for you. It's only a matter of 2 steps. When Zhang Xiaohua heard He Tianshu's words, he thought that it made sense and didn't insist. He Tianshu took the bedding and led Zhang Xiaohua out the door. He turned right and walked to the front of the 5th room. He pushed the door open and went in. No one lived in the room, but it was very clean. The layout of the room was the same as the room Zhang Xiaohua used to live in. He Tianshu threw the bedding onto a Kong and said to Zhang Xiaohua, Zhang Xiaohua, from today onwards this room is yours. You don't have to work for the time being. Take care of your injuries. If you can't stay idle, you can go with Nia Shower to the medicine field to take a look. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the empty room and said in confusion, Captain He, there's no one else in this room. I'm the only one living here? He Tianshu smiled and said, Yes, our treatment is different from Tian Zhongxi and the others. We all live in a room alone. Nia Xiao and the others are the same. Don't tell me you want to live with them? But even if you want to, they won't be willing. You should be at ease and live alone. Zhang Xiaohua rubbed her head and said, It's nothing. I'll live alone then. But I haven't lived in a room alone since I was young. I'm not used to it. He Tianshu said, Yes, slowly get used to it. If there's anything you need, you can tell me. If there's anything you don't understand, you can ask me, or ask Nia Xiao and the others. You're familiar with them, so you'll probably be bullied by them. Ha! Then, he patted his belly and said, Zhang Xiaohua, it's already past noon. Are you hungry? I'm so hungry that my front is sticking to my back. Do you want to eat with me? Zhang Xiaohua cheered and said, Okay, I haven't eaten the food from the mountain villa. I miss it very much. Captain He, let's go together. After saying that, the two of them walked to the dining room one after the other. When they walked into the dining room, everyone's lunch was coming to an end. He Tianshu's entrance didn't attract anyone's attention, but Zhang Xiaohua behind him attracted everyone's attention. Some of the people in green who had finished eating and were preparing to leave also sat down, as if waiting for something. Zhang Xiaohua walked into the hall and naturally walked to the 2 tables of the people in green. However, she noticed that the 2 tables were full of people. There wasn't a single empty seat. It seemed that she had encountered the awkwardness of the first meal. Could it be another small trap by the people in green? Zhang Xiaohua's seat used to be Lu Er's, but now that Lu Er was back, that seat was naturally taken by Lu Er. Of course, there was no empty seat for Zhang Xiaohua to sit. And those people in green who had finished eating didn't leave their seats. Then, where could Zhang Xiaohua sit? It seemed that this was the reason why the people in green sat down again. Unfortunately, the joke in their eyes was that Zhang Xiaohua wasn't at a loss like before. They saw Zhang Xiaohua take a few steps forward and suddenly patted her forehead. She changed direction and went in another direction. The people in green thought that maybe Zhang Xiaohua was going to get a chair. However, they still sat firmly in front of the dining table and didn't move at all. It seemed that they were clinging to the dining table and didn't relax. If there wasn't any free space, what was the use of taking a chair? However, when Zhang Xiaohua walked to He Tianshu's table, she didn't continue to look for a chair as everyone thought. Instead, she sat down unceremoniously. Everyone was stunned for a moment before snickering. Who didn't know that the bunch of people from Ethereal's sect had always looked down on people in green robes and hats? Now that a new manservant was sitting among them, wouldn't he be kicked back by them? The people who were expecting to see Zhang Xiaohua embarrassed didn't expect to see someone being flattened. Their hearts were filled with anticipation. They waited for the wonderful moment when Zhang Xiaohua was kicked away. Just as dozens of pairs of eyes were watching, Nie from the Misty School raised his hand. The people in green shouted in their hearts. 1, 2, 3, clap! When they shouted clap, in their hearts, Nie didn't send Zhang Xiaohua flying with one slap as they expected. Instead, he gently landed on Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder. His face was smiling like a flower as he said, "Brother, you're finally back. Are your injuries better? Hurry up and eat some drumsticks. I heard that eating something is good for nourishment." Ding dang, clang clang, plop. A series of chaotic noises were heard. The people in green clothes and small hats all had their glasses fall off. Some had their eyeballs fall off. Some had their eyeballs fall off. Some had their jaws drop. They were in a state of panic. Some even fell to the ground. After everyone sat down again and tidied up their faces, they stood up in exhaustion. They didn't see the excitement that they had hoped for and could only entertain themselves. They walked out of the dining room and collectively looked at the scorching sun in the sky. They shouted in unison, "How strange, the sun didn't rise from the west?" Afterwards, the people in green all stared at Zhang Xiaohua, who was happily eating as if they were looking at a traitor whose life was about to come to an end. They fiercely stared at her for a few times before resentfully leaving. They almost spat a few mouthfuls of phlegm on the ground. It wasn't that they didn't want to vomit, but they were afraid that they would be fined by the middle-aged woman on duty in the villa. There was no invoice, so even if they were fined, they wouldn't be able to find anyone to reimburse them. Zhang Xiaohua didn't know about the petty thoughts of the people in green all the time. Perhaps she didn't want to know. She was doing her best to eat the delicacies in front of her. In the past, she already felt that the working meals of the people in green all the time were not bad. In the past few months, Yudei's meals had also raised Zhang Xiaohua's appetite. Her taste was also a bit tricky, and she was no longer as ignorant as she was when she first came here. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua realized how ignorant she was at that time. She actually thought that He Tianshu and the others ate too little and didn't have enough food. Alas, the ancients said that one could never get tired of eating good food. Oh, right, there was also a saying, "The ignorant are fearless." There is a survey for authors. Please select it. Please add it, thank you. 0. Chapter 107. By the time Zhang Xiaohua slowly finished his first lunch after returning to the manor, the people around him had already left. Zhang Xiaohua and He Tianshu had arrived late. Seeing that He Tianshu had hurriedly finished his meal, Zhang Xiaohua wanted to stand up but was stopped by He Tianshu. He told her to eat slowly and not to rush. Anyway, he did not arrange any work for her in the afternoon. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua sat down obediently and ate this and that. She only left the dining hall when she felt full. The afternoon sun was very warm, especially when she was full. Zhang Xiaohua walked leisurely under the sun, her steps light. It was rare to have such a beautiful afternoon, and she should enjoy it. Unfortunately, Zhang Xiaohua was squinting when a female voice called out to her. "Zhang Xiaohua? Did you just finish eating?" She turned around and saw that Qiu Tong had seen her from the small courtyard in the distance. Zhang Xiaohua ran over happily and called out, "Sister Qiu Tong, why are you here?" Qiu Tong smiled and said, "The manor lord is in a bad mood today, so I went to the dining hall to take a look. What delicious food do you have here? Can I bring some back for the manor lord?" Zhang Xiaohua asked with concern. "What happened to Sister Manor Lord?" Qiu Tong said with a bitter expression. "You don't know about the matters of the manor. Don't ask too much." "Oh." Zhang Xiaohua changed the topic very honestly and said, "Sister Qiu Tong, I only returned to the manor this morning. Ma Jing and Lu Er went to the escort agency to fetch me." Qiu Tong smiled and said, "I know. I was the one who asked them to go. I was not free during this period. Today, Tian Shongxi happened to say that someone was going to Pingyang City to purchase something, so I asked them to bring you back. Zhang Xiaohua looked at Chiu Tong gratefully and said, Sister Chiu Tong, thank you. You are so good to me, just like my sister Lu Qian. Lu Qian? Chiu Tong was stunned and said, Who is that? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, Sister Lu Qian is my sister-in-law now. Before marrying my big brother, I called her big sister. Chiu Tong smiled and said, Xiaohua, everyone likes you because you're a good child who knows how to endure hardships. It's not just me. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed and said, That's right. There's also Sister Manor Lord. When will I have to properly thank her? Chiu Tong said. Yes, there will be a chance. Just keep it in mind for now. Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, I know, Sister Chiu Tong. Chiu Tong asked again, How are your injuries now? Zhang Xiaohua said, Okay, the doctor said that other than not being able to carry heavy things, everything else is fine. Chiu Tong nodded and said, I'm sure you already know that I've assigned you to Captain He's place this time. He's already arranged a place for you to stay. Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, Yes, when I came back, brother she brought me to Captain He's place and then arranged a room for me. See, I just had a meal with them and was about to go back. Chiu Tong said, That's good. You haven't fully recovered yet, so don't do anything too heavy. First, you can learn from Captain He. He has some problems that are difficult to solve, so you probably won't need to do anything. Zhang Xiaohua asked, What problems? Is it serious? Chiu Tong said, You'll know when you go and take a look. Sigh, this is also the Manor Lord's sore point. If you can solve it, you'll be doing the Manor Lord a great favor. It's much better than thanking her. Pfft, look at what I'm thinking. Xiaohua, you don't have to take it to heart. I'm just saying. Even they can't do anything about it. What can a child like you do? All right, I won't talk to you anymore. I'm in a hurry to go back. You should take care of yourself too. You've just recovered and your body is still weak. Don't get sick again. That'll only make things worse. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, All right, Chiu Tong Jiejia. I'll be careful. I'm leaving. With that said, the two waved goodbye and went their separate ways. Along the way, Zhang Xiaohua was still thinking. What kind of problem did Captain He and the Manor Lord encounter? Even the Manor Lord is so worried that he can't eat. But if they can't do anything, then I can't do anything either. I'll go take a look first. Not long after, Zhang Xiaohua returned to his room. His bag was still in Ma Jing's room. They must have gone to work now. It wasn't appropriate for him to go get his things now. It was better to wait until they came back at night. Although Captain He had told him that he didn't have to work in the afternoon and that he could rest in his room, how could he calm down? He was a teenager and didn't have the patience to sit down. Moreover, he had spent the past few months on the Kong bed. He rarely went out of Zhang Xiaohua's room. Now that he had the opportunity, how could he stay at home alone? After closing the door, Zhang Xiaohua followed the path that he had walked before to find He Tianshu and the others. He didn't know exactly where He Tianshu worked. However, he used to listen to Ma Jing's nagging, so he knew the general location. It wasn't too far away from the green-clothed men. Along the way, he saw many green-clothed men busy watering and weeding. Many people also saw Zhang Xiaohua. Some were even whispering to each other, and even pointing at him. Zhang Xiaohua thought of Ma Jing and naturally knew that they were jealous. He didn't care and just walked forward. He Tianshu's medicine field was separated from Tian Shongxi's. There were some simple barriers in the middle to prevent the green-clothed men from going over. It was obvious from afar. In the past, Zhang Xiaohua only looked at it from afar and didn't have the intention to go closer. Now, as he walked over, he didn't feel nervous at all. After passing the barrier, he looked up. There wasn't much difference between this side and the other side. There were just a few medicine fields. However, the medicine fields here were not very neat. Some of the fields already had medicinal herbs growing, but some were bare, as if they had just been reclaimed. He Tianshu and the others were also busy. When Zhang Xiaohua came closer, they noticed. He Tianshu smiled and said, Zhang Xiaohua, why didn't you rest in the house? Why did you come over? Zhang Xiaohua said, Captain He, I can't stay idle. I'll follow you. If I understand it, it'll be easier for me to do it in the future. He Tianshu said, The medicine fields here are not much different from the other side. It's just that the medicinal herbs are more important. Some medicinal herbs may need to be planted more carefully. I heard from Tian Shongxi that you did a good job there. You grew up in the fields since you were young, so it shouldn't be a problem. Later, follow Nie Xiao Er and watch carefully. He'll tell you the special places to pay attention to. But... Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and said, But what? He Tianshu said, But I hope your memory won't be as bad as when you practice boxing. Make Nie Xiao Er repeat it 180 times. Zhang Xiaohua blushed and said, No, Captain He, my memory is quite good. Even young Master Li praised me before. But I'm just bad at boxing, He Tianshu asked. Which young Master Li? Zhang Xiaohua explained. It's Li Jinfeng, young Master Li. He's studying at the academy. He's the teacher who taught me how to read. He Tianshu's eyes lit up and said, The teacher who taught you was Shuo Wenjiezi? He's really interesting. If there's a chance, I'd like to meet him. Zhang Xiaohua said, Captain, he also knows that he's interesting. When I see him next time, I'll tell him to come and see you. He Tianshu waved his hand and said, Don't say that he wants to see me. If there's a chance, let's all meet up together. Zhang Xiaohua said, Okay, young Master Li is also a very easygoing person. He won't have any objections. After that, Nie Xiao Er brought Zhang Xiaohua to work while explaining to him. The medicine field here was indeed more complicated than the other side. Every medicine had to be watered at different times and amounts. There were also many things to take note of and the specific details of the operation that needed to be carefully memorized. Luckily, Zhang Xiaohua's brain was better than when he was practicing boxing. Otherwise, He Tianshu would really be worried. There weren't many medicine fields under the care of the medicine hall, only a few pieces. Otherwise, it wouldn't just be He Tianshu and the others who came. However, in these few fields, there was still a small portion of the land that wasn't planted with medicine. But just as Zhang Xiaohua was learning the details from Nie Xiao Er, Zhang Xiaohua actually saw He Tianshu bringing someone with him to water those empty fields. He even carefully squatted there and occasionally picked up the soil to look at it, frowning as he thought about something. Zhang Xiaohua was very curious and asked Nie Xiao Er, Big brother Xiao Er, what do you think Captain He is doing? Why is he watering the empty fields and spacing out? Nie Xiao Er glared at Zhang Xiaohua and said, Zhang Xiaohua, I'm warning you. Don't call me Big Brother Xiao Er in the future. Why does it feel like you're calling a waiter? No matter what, your big brother Nie is still a disciple of the Misty School. He has some status in the pugilistic world. Why does it sound like this in your mouth? This is the last time. Call me Big Brother Xiao Nie in the future. Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, I know. Hurry and tell me what's going on with Captain He, Big Brother Xiao Er. Nie Xiao Er's nose was crooked from anger. He gave a humph and ignored him. Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly apologized and said, All right. Big Brother Xiao Nie, I was wrong, okay? Please be magnanimous and don't be angry, okay? Seeing that Nie Xiao Er still didn't speak, Zhang Xiaohua rolled her eyes and said, If you continue to be angry, when my injuries heal, I'll find Captain He and have him assign you to teach me fist techniques. When Nie Xiao Er heard this, he immediately surrendered and said with a smile, Big Brother Xiaohua, you're going off topic. If you want to learn fist techniques, just tell your big brother Nie. We don't need to trouble Captain He. You see, isn't he worrying about something right now? Let him worry about the farm. Actually, speaking of this matter, we have to start from planting medicinal herbs. You might have heard from Ma Jing and the others about how we opened up this medicinal field. It's specifically for the medicine hall's use. The herbs planted here aren't normal herbs. but some of the herbs that our Misty School obtained from other places and have already been lost in the pugilistic world. Otherwise, why wouldn't they let Ma Jing and the others plant it, and instead have us come here from Misty Mountain Villa? Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, "This, I do know a little about it. But what does it have to do with this empty space?" Nie Xiao'er smiled mysteriously and said, "Big brother Xiaohua, open your wise eyes and take a look. Or use your strict thinking to think about it. If it was an empty space, would Captain He have gone crazy and poured water there?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and said, "Could it be that it's not an empty space?" Nie Xiao'er said matter-of-factly and said, "Of course it is. There are seeds planted there." Zhang Xiaohua was even more confused and said, "Then why haven't they sprouted? Haven't the other medicinal fields sprouted long ago? Some of them have already grown very tall." Nie Xiao'er spread out his hands and said, "Yes, why haven't they sprouted? This is the reason why Captain He is so worried. If I knew, I would become a captain. Or I wouldn't be a burden to Captain He." In an instant, Zhang Xiaohua understood and also understood what Qiu Tong meant when she saw her in the morning. The seeds of these herbs had been planted for more than half a year, but they still hadn't sprouted. Presumably, they didn't know the reason, so they couldn't cultivate more herbs. There was no way for a lost herb to reappear in the Misty School. No wonder He Tianshu was worried. Big Sister Village Head didn't eat. Unfortunately, Zhang Xiaohua was just a normal child. He only knew how to cultivate crops. Now, he even knew how to cultivate normal herbs. He didn't think that he would be able to solve these problems. Looking at the pitiful He Tianshu, Zhang Xiaohua still focused on her studies. She slowly familiarized herself with Nie Xiao'er and tried to get into the role as soon as possible. The afternoon passed as Zhang Xiaohua studied diligently. At night, Zhang Xiaohua took her little bag out of Ma Jing's room. Ignoring Ma Jing's persistent attempts to pull her hand and his resentful gaze, she ran back to her room like a wisp of smoke. She had finally escaped Ma Jing's demonic feet. How could she want to stay a moment longer? When she thought about how Lu Er didn't seem to feel any discomfort while staying there, Zhang Xiaohua's admiration for Lu Er immediately surged like a torrential river. Nighttime was still the time for He Tianshu and the others to practice. Zhang Xiaohua went to the training room as usual. Not long after, He Tianshu and the others arrived. He Tianshu said, "Zhang Xiaohua, don't practice boxing yet. Try to get into the horse stance. See if your right arm can withstand it." Zhang Xiaohua tried and said, "Captain He, my arm is fine. However, the bandage on my right hand is still there. I can't make a fist." He Tianshu said, "Then don't make a fist. Try the horse stance. You haven't done it for a few months, right?" Zhang Xiaohua blushed and said, "That's right. In the beginning, I stayed on the Kong bed all day long and didn't dare to move. Later on, when I got better and could move, I hurt my bones again. I just walked around the room. I've long forgotten about the horse stance." He Tianshu smiled and said, "That's right. You didn't practice the horse stance at all. How could you care about it? It's not your fault that you don't know how to cherish things that you get easily. I'm guessing that you've already returned those moves to me." Zhang Xiaohua argued, "No, Captain He. I still remember those moves. If you don't believe me, I'll show you." After saying that, she was about to get into the stance and start practicing. He Tianshu hurriedly stopped her and said, "Don't blindly show off. If you can't even make a fist, how are you going to practice? Wait a few days. However, it's fine if you've forgotten those moves. It might be better to practice them again." After saying that, he laughed and went to practice. Zhang Xiaohua had nothing to say. She could only get into the horse stance and watch the others practice. Seeing Nie Xiao and the others practice set after set of fist techniques, palm techniques, sword techniques, etc., Zhang Xiaohua was very envious. When would she have such a day? He Tianshu, on the other hand, was practicing under a tree. His movements were very slow, but Zhang Xiaohua could clearly feel the power of each move. Each move could bring about a kind of power. It was not like when he was practicing his own boxing. It was just a move. Only the offensive moves had pure power. He could not help but be moved in his heart. Was this the internal energy that Zhang Xiaohu was talking about? Thus, Zhang Xiaohua concentrated on watching He Tianshu practice, hoping to discover something from it. Unfortunately, when He Tianshu finished practicing a set of fist techniques, he could only feel that the other person's fist techniques were vigorous and vigorous. He couldn't see anything else. Even the moves were vague. Could it be that the Zhang Xiaohua who forgot the moves was back again? Or was the feng shui of Huanxi Mountain Villa not as good as the Lotus Escort Agency? After He Tianshu finished practicing the fist techniques, he walked in front of Zhang Xiaohua. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's motionless body, he said with satisfaction, "Zhang Xiaohua, your horse stance is really good. Other than your right arm, the other parts are the same as what I taught you before. Your horse stance level is really not ordinary. When our Misty School has a horse stance competition, I will definitely recommend you to go. You will definitely get first place." Zhang Xiaohua said happily. "Really, Captain He, if there is such an opportunity, you must call me. When will it be?" He Tianshu smiled and said, "Okay, no problem. When the time comes, I will definitely call you. Okay, you should take it too. Rest early. Tomorrow, you should follow Nye shower. You don't want to stay in the house alone anyway." Zhang Xiaohua jumped up and said, "Okay, I know." But in her heart, she was still thinking, when would the time come? Following behind He Tianshu, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but ask, "Captain He, when you were practicing just now, did you use internal energy?" He Tianshu stopped in his tracks and turned around to ask, "How did you know?" Zhang Xiaohua said, "I saw that your fist techniques were different from mine. It seemed like there was power hidden in the moves. My recruitment was purely based on the moves." He Tianshu was silent and said, "Your eyesight or intuition is really good. It's like this." Zhang Xiaohua probed, "Captain He, this internal energy cultivation method can you teach me?" He Tianshu smiled and raised his hand. "Internal energy cultivation method? You learned it from the Lotus Flower Escort Agency?" Zhang Xiaohua said, "Yes, I heard it from my second brother. He is an escort at the escort agency and is now learning internal energy at the martial arts school." He Tianshu was stunned and asked, "Your second brother is an escort, but he is learning internal energy at the martial arts school?" Zhang Xiaohua said, "Yes, it's like this." He Tianshu said, "It seems that your second brother is not like you. He should be an expert in martial arts. Most martial arts schools only teach internal energy cultivation methods to the elites." Zhang Xiaohua said proudly, "Yes, my second brother is a genius. That's why he can learn internal energy at the martial arts school." Then, she asked expectantly, "Do you think I can learn it?" 0. Chapter 108. He Tianshu sighed and said, "Xiaohua, it's not that I don't want to teach you, but first, the inner strength method that I learned is only for the disciples of the Misty School. It cannot be taught to anyone who isn't a disciple of the school. If it is discovered that it was taught privately, not only will I be punished by the discipline hall, you will also be crippled of your martial arts. Second, this inner strength method is not like fist techniques. It requires talent. If your talent is not good, then you will not have any progress after practicing for several years. Did your second brother also tell you this? He can't teach you inner strength." Zhang Xiaohua nodded disappointedly and said, "Yes, second brother also said this." He Tianshu rubbed Zhang Xiaohua's head and said, "Go back. Everyone has their own fate. The heavens have already arranged it. If you have this fate, then perhaps in the near future, you will be able to get what you want. Otherwise, even if you try your best, you will gain nothing." Zhang Xiaohua lowered his head and disappointedly followed He Tianshu back. Under the oil lamp, Zhang Xiaohua carefully read a book. This was not a fist technique, but some books that Li Jifeng had left for him. During the period of recovery, he had developed a habit of reading some books at night. No matter if it was a fist technique or a book, if he didn't read it, it would seem that something was missing. He had read all the fist technique manuals that could be read, and only the books were left. There were countless books, enough for Zhang Xiaohua to read for a lifetime. Suddenly, he saw the words, "Reviewing the old to learn the new," and "Learning while practicing," in the book. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but be moved. He carefully put down the book and closed his eyes to think about the fist technique manuals that he had memorized. There was no special reason why he didn't tell He Tianshu this today. It was like a child who had gotten his favorite toy and would not immediately tell the adults. The child would take it out to show off at an unexpected moment to surprise the adults. He would then look at the adults' stunned expressions and laugh loudly. That was all. Zhang Xiaohua also had the same thought, but most importantly, he still did not have confidence in himself. He was afraid that he would not be able to master these fist techniques. Rather than saying it now, it would not be too late to say it when he really mastered them. Fortunately, with Zhang Xiaohua's thoughts, that fist technique was like a river, and she could still clearly recall it. However, Zhang Xiaohua's expression did not change. She raised her right hand and looked at the bandage. She touched it with her left hand for a moment, but still did not take it off. Late at night, Zhang Xiaohua blew out the light and fell asleep peacefully. In the next few days, Zhang Xiaohua followed Nie Xiao to familiarize herself with the planting of various medicinal herbs during the day, and practiced the horse stance at night. However, Zhang Xiaohua didn't know that Elder Yu, whom he hadn't seen for several months, would come to visit them every night. That night, Zhang Xiaohua was still reading under the oil lamp when she heard someone knocking on the door. Zhang Xiaohua was startled. This was the first time someone had knocked on the door at night. Thus, she put down her book and opened the door. Using the light in the room, it was actually the one-armed Elder Yu. Zhang Xiaohua was very surprised. "Elder Yu, how are you? Please come in." After Zhang Xiaohua invited Elder Yu into the room and invited him to sit on the chair, she said, "Elder Yu, I've been back for many days, but I haven't seen you. Are you very busy?" Elder Yu smiled. "Not to mention that you've only been back for a few days. How many times have you seen me during the month you stayed in the villa?" Zhang Xiaohua said. "It's because I haven't seen you for several months, so I'm a little surprised." "Why are you here today?" Elder Yu said. "It's nothing much. I just heard that you're back, so I came to take a look at your injuries." Zhang Xiaohua was a little flattered. "Thank you for your concern, Elder Yu. I should be fine now. I'll get Captain He to take a look tomorrow and remove the bandage." Elder Yu waved his hand. "There's no need to wait until tomorrow. I'll help you remove it now. The recovery of a bone injury isn't something that can be determined in a day or two." Zhang Xiaohua was more curious about Elder Yu's attitude. From the first time they met, he was neither cold nor indifferent to her. Why was he so concerned about her today? It was thought-provoking. However, Elder Yu was an old man after all, and he was concerned about her. Zhang Xiaohua also respected her elders, so Zhang Xiaohua allowed Elder Yu to remove the bandage on her hand. In fact, Zhang Xiaohua's injuries were already healed. The bandage was just a form of psychological sustenance. Just as Elder Yu said, there was no difference whether he removed it today or tomorrow. Thus, even though Elder Yu only had one right hand, he was still able to remove the bandage easily with Zhang Xiaohua's help. Zhang Xiaohua's right hand didn't look any different from before. It was just that her skin was abnormally pale, probably due to the lack of light. Elder Yu didn't immediately examine Zhang Xiaohua's fingers. Instead, he said, "Try clenching your fists first." Zhang Xiaohua obeyed and tried to retract her fingers. This was a very normal action in the past, but now, it was abnormally clumsy. Even her fingers didn't seem to listen to her. Moreover, Zhang Xiaohua's fingers were retracted to a certain extent. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't move them further. In other words, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't even clench her fist. Zhang Xiaohua panicked. "Elder Yu, what's going on? My hand? Why is my hand like this?" Elder Yu said amiably. "Don't be anxious. It's always like this after an injury. In the future, you have to practice retracting your fingers frequently. It'll take time for you to recover. Now let me take a look at the details of your bones." Then, Elder Yu used his thumb and index finger to pinch Zhang Xiaohua's fingers. He examined them inch by inch. After a long while, he finally finished examining. Elder Yu raised his head. Under the light of the oil lamp, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't see his expression. Zhang Xiaohua wanted to ask, but when she looked at her hand, she didn't see anything wrong with it, so she didn't ask. Elder Yu also didn't tell Zhang Xiaohua about the recovery of her bones. Instead, he asked her, "Why do you want to learn martial arts?" Zhang Xiaohua was baffled. She didn't understand and replied, "Of course it's to protect my family." "Other than protecting your family, what else will you do if you learn martial arts?" Elder Yu asked. Zhang Xiaohua furrowed her brows and answered honestly, "No, I haven't thought that much. Right now, I just want to practice my fist techniques." This time, it was Elder Yu's turn to furrow his brows. He asked again, "Then after you learn martial arts, will you help the weak and help the strong? Will you help the weak?" Hearing this, Zhang Xihua's mind immediately flashed with the scene of her and her father being bullied in Lu Town, and the scene of her and her elder brother being trampled on the ground by the strong people of Xichui Mountain. She couldn't help but feel her blood boil. She spat out, "Of course I will. If I learn martial arts and have the ability to help others and help the weak, of course I will do it." Elder Yu asked again, "Then are you sure that the weak are wronged and should be helped?" Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled. "Elder Yu, this, I don't understand. If the weak don't have a reason, why would they provoke the strong?" Elder Yu smiled and said, "This question is a bit difficult. You're still young and don't understand people's hearts. Perhaps you'll understand in the future." Then, he asked again, "Then if you want to help the weak and help the strong, but the strong person's martial arts are stronger than yours, will you help?" This sentence made Zhang Xiaohua not know how to answer. This time in Lu Town, of course, it was Zhang Xiaolong who stepped forward bravely. He wasn't afraid of the strong, but the result was also disastrous. She remembered it clearly. Mr. Lu and Lu Kai also reminded her to act according to her ability. This question was really hard to answer. However, in an instant, a thought flashed through her mind. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Isn't this the reason why I have to continuously practice fist techniques and even internal strength?" Elder Yu furrowed his brows and then relaxed. He didn't ask Zhang Xiaohua any more questions. Instead, he looked at Zhang Xiaohua's right hand and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, although the bones in your right hand have healed, it was still damaged by internal strength. It's no longer the same as before. It's like a broken vase. No matter how much it's repaired, it can still be used. However, the cracks in the vase still exist. This can't be repaired easily. If you're not careful, it can still be broken. This will be a huge hindrance to your martial arts. You must be mentally prepared." Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand the seriousness of the problem. She smiled and said, "This situation, the escort agency's doctor has already told me. I'll slowly recover. Bones can grow back. After all, it's different from a vase. As long as I can practice fist techniques and internal strength, it's fine. I'm not thinking of saving the entire martial arts world." Elder Yu sighed and didn't say anything else. He only nodded his head and told Zhang Xiaohua to rest early. He then turned around and left. Zhang Xiaohua sent him to the door. Looking at Elder Yu's back in the night, she was very puzzled. This old man had stayed in her room for so long and asked so many questions. What exactly did he want? Zhang Xiaohua didn't think that it was as simple as removing the bandages and checking on her injuries. However, what exactly was the reason? Zhang Xiaohua couldn't figure it out even after thinking for a long time. However, time was the answer to all questions. When the time came, she would naturally know. Zhang Xiaohua fell asleep as she thought about it. She didn't even blow out the oil lamp. The next morning, Zhang Xiaohua went to the place where Tianshu and the others were practicing martial arts as usual. As he walked, he stretched and stretched his fingers, continuously practicing. As usual, Zhang Xiaohua was the first to arrive. He didn't get into the horse stance. Instead, he clenched his fists and tried out a few fist techniques. He realized that even if he didn't clench his fists, he could still execute a complete move without any discomfort. It was just that when his right hand changed between fist and palm, it was a little sluggish and his fingers were a little stiff. Presumably, through his continuous practice, it would gradually improve in the future. Thinking about how he didn't dare to practice martial arts for fear of affecting the recovery of his fingers, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but find it funny. If he had known earlier, he would have started practicing martial arts a long time ago. He wouldn't have to watch He Tianshu and the others practice martial arts every day while he himself was in the horse stance. However, he had forgotten that he couldn't clench his fists before removing the bandages. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was happily practicing, He Tianshu and the others came over. He Tianshu smiled and greeted Zhang Xiaohua. "Zhang Xiaohua, why are you up so early? Are you impatient to remove the bandages?" Zhang Xiaohua grinned as he stretched out his right hand and clenched his fist. He boasted, "Captain He, look, I've already removed the bandages. It's just that my fingers still can't bend completely. I still need to train more." He Tianshu scolded with a smile. "Child, you're really impatient. Didn't we agree to remove it today? Why did you remove it by yourself?" Zhang Xiaohua replied seriously. "Captain He, you're wrongly accusing me. I listened to you and was prepared to let you remove it today. However, Elder Yu came to my room last night and removed it for me." He Tianshu asked curiously, "What's going on?" Thus, Zhang Xiaohua told He Tianshu everything that happened last night. He Tianshu was also confused, but when he heard Elder Yu's questions for Zhang Xiaohua, he furrowed his brows. Elder Yu was clearly admiring Zhang Xiaohua's character. Could it be that Elder Yu wanted to take in a disciple? However, He Tianshu wasn't too clear about Elder Yu's background. He had only vaguely heard about him from others. He could be considered a figure in the pugilistic world. If he was interested in Zhang Xiaohua, then it was Zhang Xiaohua's fortune. But what about Zhang Xiaohua's hands? He Tianshu couldn't help but feel suspicious. Then, he felt relieved. This was someone else's business. He couldn't accept Zhang Xiaohua no matter what, so why should he worry about it? Then, he thought of the few questions Zhang Xiaohua had answered and thought to himself, this Zhang Xiaohua is really an honest child. If he was a little smarter, he would have climbed up the pole long ago. Even if he didn't fill the sky with lotuses, he would definitely not give up. At the very least, he would have made a statement for justice, for peace, and for the happiness of the people of Jianghu. Sai, who knew that this Zhang Xiaohua only cared about protecting his family and practicing his fist techniques. He actually didn't understand the hidden meaning in Elder Yu's words. If he did, he would have knelt on the ground and begged Elder Yu to accept him. What a pity! But if that was the case, would she still be Zhang Xiaohua? He Tianshu shook his head. This Zhang Xiaohua wasn't the down-to-earth Zhang Xiaohua that everyone liked. The pugilistic world still needed people who could do things. When Zhang Xiaohua saw He Tianshu shaking his head and knitting his brows, he couldn't help asking, "Captain He, Elder Yu is doing this for my own good. He wants to take a look at my injuries, so please don't be angry." He Tianshu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He glared at her and said, "Am I that petty? Are you angry that someone took off your bandage first?" Zhang Xiaohua stuck out her tongue and didn't dare to speak. Then she said, "Captain He, since you're not angry, then I've removed the bandage. I want to practice my fist technique. Can you give me some pointers?" When He Tianshu heard this, he immediately took half a step back and prepared to use his qigong. He said, "How about this? You first do some recovery exercises and revise your previous fist techniques. As for the new fist techniques, I'll ask Nia Xiaoer to teach you, okay?" After he finished speaking, he didn't wait for Zhang Xiaohua's reply and ran away with his qigong. Zhang Xiaohua was left behind and asked curiously, "Why did you run away so fast?" "Captain He, I didn't plan on asking you to teach me. I've already memorized a lot of fist techniques. I just wanted you to watch from the side. Why did you run away?" Then, just as she was about to look for Nie Xiao and the others, she found that they were nowhere to be seen. Zhang Xiaohua felt a burst of admiration. It was so good to have qigong. Since there was no one to guide her, Zhang Xiaohua didn't mind. She had so many fist techniques in her mind and every set was deeply engraved in her memory. If she wanted to perform them all, it wasn't impossible. She didn't need anyone to teach her. Thinking about this, the corners of Zhang Xiaohua's mouth slowly curled up. She thought to herself, "Wait until I've practiced all the fist techniques. See if I don't get a dustpan to collect your dropped jaws." Thus, Zhang Xiaohua took up a stance and began her first practice after recovering from her injury. Zhang Xiaohua had a lot of fist techniques in her mind. She didn't deliberately choose one and just randomly picked one. She narrowed her eyes and searched her memory. Then, she started practicing with the figure in her mind. After the first practice, it could be said to be perfect. It was almost exactly the same as Zhang Xiaohua's memory. Zhang Xiaohua was extremely happy. Could it be that she really wasn't trash? Was there a problem with Captain He's teaching method? Could it be that only by looking at the fist techniques and memorizing them in her mind could she truly learn the complete fist techniques? A series of questions prompted Zhang Xiaohua to immediately practice a second time. The result was very satisfactory. He didn't miss any moves. Unfortunately, it was already late. There wasn't much time for Zhang Xiaohua to verify it a third time. He hurried to the dining room. However, Zhang Xiaohua didn't, or maybe he didn't even notice that the figure in his mind had faded a lot. It wasn't as clear as before. Now, Zhang Xiaohua had already gotten into character. He followed Nie Xiao'er to do some basic chores. He was already very used to using his left hand. His left hand could complete everything very flexibly. However, when he wasn't very busy or felt that he had time, Zhang Xiaohua insisted on using his right hand, even though it was a little clumsy. Today, he deliberately used his right hand, such as holding a small shovel, small scissors, and so on. This was because he knew that only by training his right hand as soon as possible could he truly learn the fist techniques as soon as possible. This was because he could already perform a complete set of fist techniques today. Just thinking about it made his heart burn. After dinner, Zhang Xiaohua went to the practice area early. However, he didn't stay in the same place. Instead, he walked outside for a while, far away from He Tianshu and the others. However, he didn't have to worry that He Tianshu couldn't find him. Although it was far away, there were lanterns hanging on the trees. Just as Zhang Xiaohua thought, as soon as He Tianshu and the others went out, they saw Zhang Xiaohua's lantern from afar. They thought that he was shy and didn't want to show his incomplete moves. He Tianshu even praised Zhang Xiaohua in his heart. Now that his injury was healed, he knew how to be shy. In the past, he was very thick-skinned when practicing fist techniques. He forgot one move after another without blushing. Zhang Xiaohua stood under the tree and calmed his emotions. He slowly practiced the set of fist techniques again in the morning. He could actually finish it without missing a move. He was naturally very happy. He could finally confirm that he could finish a set of fist techniques. How could he not be happy? Just as he was about to run over to He Tianshu to report the good news, he remembered that He Tianshu was also practicing. He could wait until tomorrow. Thus, he began to think about whether he could practice the second set of fist techniques. He practiced as he wished. The moves of the fist techniques were all in his mind. Zhang Xiaohua didn't stop practicing the second set. Sure enough, the effect was as obvious as the first set. He could still perform it completely. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua was very excited. He practiced the two sets of fist techniques from beginning to end, over and over again. Please collect it. Thank you. 0. Chapter 109. It was a pity that Zhang Xiaohua didn't know that as he practiced over and over again, his moves were slowly changing, gradually breaking away from the original records in the manual. Moreover, the figure in his mind was slowly blurring, as if he was forgetting the deeply engraved moves in the manual. Zhang Xiaohua, who finished practicing, felt very comfortable. He read a book under the oil lamp for a while, then went to bed early. Even in his dreams, there was a smile on his face. When he woke up in the morning, Zhang Xiaohua excitedly ran to the training grounds, full of joy. He waited there as if he was presenting a treasure, wanting to give He Tianshu and Nye Xiao a surprise. He Tianshu and the others saw Zhang Xiaohua standing there early in the morning, but they didn't find it strange. This guy woke up so early every day, who knows where the sleepiness of a youth went. Everyone greeted him normally and then went back to practicing. Only He Tianshu smiled and asked, Zhang Xiaohua, why did you run so far last night? Were you practicing some peerless martial arts? You're even hiding it and not letting us see? However, any peerless martial arts requires a good body to practice. You have to first take care of your body. You have to know that the body is the capital to roam the Jianghu. After He Tianshu finished teasing, he prepared to leave. Zhang Xiaohua mysteriously said, Captain He, I really did practice some peerless martial arts yesterday. Do you want to see? He Tianshu stopped in his tracks and raised his eyebrows, secretly thinking, Not bad, you actually know how to counter lust. This child can be taught. However, if you want to spar with me, you're still too inexperienced. Thus he went with the flow and crossed his arms in front of his chest, shouting loudly, Little ones, come over. Zhang Xiaohua wants to show us some peerless martial arts. Nye Xiao and the others heard the captain's call and immediately used their movement skills to gather. Everyone looked at Zhang Xiaohua, their eyes full of smiles. The four of them knew Zhang Xiaohua's aptitude. Who would expect Zhang Xiaohua to practice some peerless martial arts? They just didn't see each other last night. What kind of fortuitous encounter could there be? Their actions today were just adding to the jokes in their lives, treating Zhang Xiaohua as their own cute little brother. Zhang Xiaohua saw that everyone's eyes were fixed on him. He was originally full of confidence, but now he was a little nervous. He muttered, It's not some peerless martial arts. It's just that I practiced 2 sets of fist techniques yesterday and can perform them completely. Everyone was surprised. Is that so? Really? It must be a peerless martial art. Our little blossom wouldn't be able to remember ordinary fist techniques. Zhang Xiaohua ignored their teasing. He calmed himself down, got into a horse stance, and prepared to start practicing the fist technique he had practiced the day before. However, when he raised his arm, he didn't know where to hit. He had actually forgotten. His mind went blank. What was going on? Zhang's his, how his yesterday, he was very familiar with it. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua raise his arm to hit but stop, everyone's heart was like a mirror. They smiled and said, Zhang Xiaohua, hurry up. We can't wait to see it. After Zhang Xiaohua's panic, he was slightly disappointed. He could only say, I forgot this set. Watch my next set. He thought to himself. Sigh, it's not the first time I've been mocked by you guys. I'll get used to it. However, the gods passing by must bless me. Please don't let me forget the next set of fist techniques. Even if I can remember 1 or 2 moves, it's fine. Sure enough, perhaps Zhang Xiaohua's prayer was effective. A god flew over Zhang Xiaohua's head. In short, Zhang Xiaohua really performed 2 sets of fist techniques in front of He Tianshu and the others. However, these 2 sets of fist techniques were not connected to each other. He Tianshu looked at Zhang Xiaohua's 2 sets of fist techniques and thought for a long time. He asked, Zhang Xiaohua, these 2 sets of fist techniques seem to be from the South Branch Fist? However, the way you're fighting seems to be different from what I know. Zhang Xiaohua clasped his hands and stood there pitifully. He didn't know what to say or do. He really wanted to prove that he wasn't a good-for-nothing. He really wanted to show He Tianshu all the fist techniques he knew according to the fist technique manual in his mind. However, he was afraid that all the fist techniques would be yesterday's reenactment, and he would forget them the next day. In that case, he might as well not let them know that he had memorized a lot of fist techniques. Looking at Zhang Xiaohua's appearance, He Tianshu's heart ached. He walked up to him and patted his head, saying, Zhang Xiaohua, I know you're in the escort agency. Although you're recuperating, I'm sure you still want to practice your fist techniques. You must have learned these 2 sets of fist techniques from the escort agency and now you want to show them to us. I didn't see all of your moves today, but I believe you must have worked hard and learned them before. So, Zhang Xiaohua, you have to pull yourself together. If others can learn it after practicing it once, you can practice it 10 times, 100 times. You can do it. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes were filled with tears. When he heard He Tianshu's words, he couldn't help but feel shocked. He wiped his tears with his left sleeve and asked unconfidently, Captain He, can I really do it? He Tianshu nodded and said firmly, Yes. However, he prayed in his heart, Gods and Buddhas all over the sky, please forgive my lies. I'm doing this for Zhang Xiaohua's sake. Only you guys will know if it's true or not, right? Zhang Xiaohua seemed to be really encouraged. The dispirited look on his face was swept away. He smiled and said, All right, I'll definitely work hard and not let you down, Captain He. He Tianshu smiled and said, I believe that. You definitely won't. However, in his heart he thought, I don't have any expectations at all. You won't let me down at all. The 3 people beside him also said, Xiaohua, you must work hard. We all have high hopes for you. After breakfast, He Tianshu was going to lead the 4 people to work in the medicine field. However, Zhang Xiaohua asked He Tianshu for leave and wanted to rest for a day. He Tianshu naturally agreed without hesitation. Zhang Xiaohua's injuries had just healed and he was still resting. A few days ago, Zhang Xiaohua had insisted on working. He Tianshu looked at Zhang Xiaohua's somewhat injured right hand and felt very uncomfortable. Today, Zhang Xiaohua wanted to take a day off. He even said that he wanted Zhang Xiaohua to rest for a few more days. Zhang Xiaohua stayed in the room alone and thought carefully. The memories of the 2 sets of fist techniques from yesterday no longer existed in his mind. However, there were 2 more moves that were similar to the Arhat fist. Zhang Xiaohua seemed to understand that the fist techniques he learned from He Tianshu were no different from the fist techniques he learned from the manual. It wasn't that he suddenly became enlightened. He would still forget the moves. The moves that were left in his mind were only memories. He hadn't mastered them yet. When he started practicing, those complete fist techniques would be the same as when he learned from He Tianshu. He would forget the moves one by one. He really wasn't made for martial arts. However, Zhang Xiaohua immediately understood that everyone's path of martial arts was not the same. He had already thought about it when he was recuperating. It was just that he was blinded by his clear memory of the fist techniques, and thought that he could learn the complete fist techniques. Now that he had returned to the starting point, it wasn't considered a failure. He should just obediently combine his own fist techniques and wait until he could link up a complete set of fist techniques. However, it was also good that he could clearly remember the fist techniques. It was equivalent to finding himself a master. He didn't need to look for others to learn fist techniques. It provided him with good materials to combine his fist techniques. There were more than 100 sets of fist techniques in his mind. He didn't know if he could complete a complete set of fist techniques after he finished practicing them. Sighing, Zhang Xiaohua didn't think about it anymore. He pushed open the door and went out. He still went to the place where he practiced last night. He gathered his thoughts and started, yesterday again, according to his memory. In fact, the most important thing in doing anything was to find the goal and not the twists and turns in the process. From Zhang Xiaohua's martial arts practice process, it deeply illustrated this point. What Zhang Xiaohua didn't lack was that kind of hard work and that kind of tenacity unique to country people. What he didn't have was that kind of vision from a high vantage point. There was also no one to guide him and give him pointers. There was also no one to tailor his clothes and assign a one-on-one training plan for him. Even if He Tianshu liked this young man very much and could teach him martial arts fist techniques, there were times when he wouldn't specifically work hard for him. After all, Zhang Xiaohua wasn't his disciple and wasn't his blood relative. He Tianshu could teach Zhang Xiaohua so much and enlighten him on his fist techniques. It was already quite good. Otherwise, this country youth could only wave a small medicine spatula and dream about his martial arts. Nye Xiao'er was the same. Now that Zhang Xiaohua had found the path that suited him, he was like a tiger that had grown wings. Naturally, he was unstoppable. He practiced a certain fist technique in his memory over and over again, experiencing the changes in his memory. But what surprised him was that no matter how he practiced, the memory in his mind remained the same. It didn't become blurry because of the familiarity of the moves. This was really strange. So he started practicing the second set of fist techniques. This time, he didn't practice too much. He only practiced it twice to familiarize himself with the fist technique before practicing the third set. This third set he practiced it about 10 times and confirmed that he was very familiar with it. On this day of holiday, Zhang Xiaohua was practicing his fist techniques from morning to night. He practiced about 10 sets of fist techniques. Except for the morning practice, when he paid more attention to the fist techniques in his memory, Zhang Xiaohua didn't deliberately observe the other fist techniques. The next morning, Zhang Xiaohua arrived at the foot of the tree with uneasiness and anticipation. He took up his stance. Sure enough, as Zhang Xiaohua expected, the fist techniques that he had familiarized himself with the day before had all disappeared from his memory. What was left behind were the fragmented moves that he had memorized deeply. It was difficult to forget them even if he wanted to. As for whether these moves were the same as the ones in the manual, it was easy to figure out the answer. Zhang Xiaohua wasn't disappointed because of the past. Instead, he was faintly excited. It seemed that he had found an unusual path. Whether this path was correct or not was still unknown. He needed to continue working hard and slowly explore. However, as the saying goes, everyone has a time when they cross the river by feeling the stones. Wasn't making a mistake just like paying tuition? Zhang Xiaohua was still young. If he made a mistake, even the heavens would forgive him. Since it was a set of fist techniques, no matter if he practiced it 3 times, 10 times, or even dozens of times, he would eventually forget it. The moves would have to be changed. Zhang Xiaohua naturally wasn't stupid enough to practice each fist technique dozens of times. He successfully practiced 3 sets of fist techniques in one morning. During the day, Zhang Xiaohua didn't officially start working in the herbal field. Therefore, he just followed behind Nie Xiao'er. In his free time, he was still recuperating in the escort agency. He slowly combined the remaining moves in his mind. However, perhaps it was because he didn't have many moves now. He could only link the previous 2 moves together. This made Zhang Xiaohua feel a little uneasy. He didn't know if his choice was correct. At night, Zhang Xiaohua was still practicing his fist techniques like he was in the morning. He stayed far away from He Tianshu and the others. However, Zhang Xiaohua still found that he could still practice the fist techniques that he practiced in the morning at night. He couldn't spend the night watching it. Could it be that something would happen at night? Or was it because he was so stupid that he couldn't take a good rest? Zhang Xiaohua had his doubts for the first time. Practicing fist techniques in the morning and at night, and building blocks in the day. This was Zhang Xiaohua's happy life. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was enjoying this comfortable life, a pair of eyes kept observing him. It was the one-armed elder Yu. However, his qigong was so good that even He Tianshu might not be able to detect him, let alone Zhang Xiaohua. However, when Elder Yu saw Zhang Xiaohua diligently practicing the fist techniques that were popular in the pugilistic world, he was very surprised. He didn't know where this child learned so much rubbish. Didn't he know that it was better to eat a fresh peach than to eat a basket of rotten apricots? What was the use of practicing such rubbish? He really didn't understand. Elder Yu secretly shook his head. However, when he saw Zhang Xiaohua's messy, incomplete, and error-filled moves in the morning, he almost fell down from the wall he was standing on. What kind of talent was this? It was simply the best in the world. Elder Yu's head shook so hard that it almost hit Grandma's bridge. The only thing that made him feel gratified was that Zhang Xiaohua would practice his fist techniques under the tree whenever he had the time. This hard work was really worthy of praise. However, how much could hard work be worth? Zhang Xiaohua's passion finally ignited at noon one day. On his way back, his mind kept thinking about those unrelated moves of his. Suddenly, there were 2 moves that were perfectly combined. Zhang Xiaohua was so happy that he almost jumped up. What did this mean? It meant that he had chosen the right path, and it was the right path for him to practice martial arts. At night, Zhang Xiaohua was even more hardworking. He practiced a few sets of fist techniques in a row. He wasn't tired, but the fingers on his right hand were really sore. He couldn't continue practicing. If he didn't make a fist, then it could only be a palm technique. If he made a mistake, then the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to try. Day after day, the fist techniques in Zhang Xiaohua's mind were slowly forgotten. In another river of memories, there were more and more incomplete moves, and there were more and more moves that could be combined. Zhang Xiaohua was constantly accumulating and improving. As for He Tianshu and the others, when they saw Zhang Xiaohua hiding under a tree and practicing alone, they really wanted to ask about it. However, when they thought of his amazing memory, they retreated. Anyway, Zhang Xiaohua was only practicing fist techniques and wouldn't go crazy, so they just let him be. In fact, He Tianshu might not have other thoughts. He knew about the injury on Zhang Xiaohua's right hand. Although he wasn't a doctor, for such a serious injury, as long as one practiced martial arts, most people would have a certain idea. That was, his right hand was crippled. Why? Fists were used to hit others. If it was a fracture, it would be fine. After the injury was healed, when the fist was used as a weapon, other bones could be used as support to protect the fractured area. However, Zhang Xiaohua's fracture was the entire palm. Imagine if such a fist was used, where could it exert force? People often say that to kill 1,000 enemies, you lose 800 of your own men. If one's fist couldn't exert force, how could it exert force on the opponent? Moreover, Zhang Xiaohua was born with great strength. One arm had the strength of 250 kilograms. He was afraid that before the 250 kilograms of strength could make the opponent beg for mercy, the rebound force would cause Zhang Xiaohua's right hand to break again. Therefore, He Tianshu also intentionally or unintentionally wanted to stop Zhang Xiaohua from progressing further on the path of martial arts. What fist technique could Zhang Xiaohua practice by himself over there? It was just the same few moves over and over again. There wouldn't be any major mistakes. He was too lazy to look at it and let Zhang Xiaohua play by himself. There was always an end to everything. That night, Zhang Xiaohua finally practiced all the fist techniques in his memory. He secretly let out a sigh of relief. While practicing, the combination of moves also improved greatly. Not only were there many moves that were linked together, there were even 4, 5, and 10 moves that were perfectly linked together. However, practicing fist techniques was a simulated process while combining them was a real process of racking one's brain juice. This gave Zhang Xiaohua a headache. But fortunately, today was the last night. When he woke up tomorrow morning, it would be the time to see the real deal. He didn't know if these moves could really be combined into a complete set of fist techniques. That night, Zhang Xiaohua fell asleep with a heart full of worries. The next morning, Zhang Xiaohua came to the tree early. He was already very familiar with the results of his practice. There were only 5 moves left that he still remembered clearly from yesterday's practice. Seeing that it was still early, Zhang Xiaohua wanted to use this time to combine these 5 moves into the fist technique that had already begun to take shape. But the result made Zhang Xiaohua surprised and happy. He was happy that these 5 moves were still perfectly complemented. He was surprised that this set of fist techniques still wasn't completely linked together. Zhang Xiaohua carefully thought for a moment in his mind. He realized that there were 101 moves in this set of fist techniques that he had combined. In the middle, there were 7 places that weren't linked together. He didn't know if it was because he was missing 7 moves or more. Zhang Xiaohua repeated these 101 moves twice. The gaps in the middle were only random links. He was sure that he had memorized it. As for whether he really remembered it, he could only think about it tomorrow. Now, what he needed to consider was where he could find fist arts manuals and learn more fist arts to supplement his combination of fist arts. 0. Chapter 110. Zhang Xiaohua happily walked towards the dining room. He had gained a lot from this morning, and it was also the most fulfilling and important morning he had ever had since he started practicing his fist arts. Everything pointed to a beautiful future, and all that was missing was that final push. Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of Zhang Xiaohua. He jumped in fright, and quickly stopped in his tracks. When he saw clearly, he patted his chest with lingering fear and said, "Elder Yu, even if your Qigong is powerful, you don't have to show off in front of me like this. As the saying goes, people can scare people to death. You appear and disappear so mysteriously. Fortunately, my heart is very strong." "Boss," you said with a straight face. "How's your messy fist arts coming along?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and shouted, "Elder Yu, this is my privacy, how can you peek at it? If you want to see it, you can tell me. If you don't tell me, how would I know that you want to see it? If you don't tell me, you're hurting my heart. I'm going to report you to the village head." Elder Yu curled his lips and said, "I wouldn't even bother to look at your erroneous moves even if they were placed in front of me. Peeping? I don't have that kind of free time." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "If you didn't see it, how would you know that I'm practicing my fist arts? How would you know that it's messy?" Elder Yu said, "Who can't see you hiding under the tree every day to practice your fist arts? Everyone only knows that you can't remember the entire set of fist arts, but I'm too embarrassed to say it. Do you think I don't have ears?" Zhang Xiaohua's face turned red. He wanted to tell Elder Yu about his progress, but whether he was doing the right thing, and whether he could still remember the fist arts tomorrow, was still unknown. Thus, he told himself in his heart, "I'll endure it, okay?" Then, he raised his head and asked Elder Yu, "Just treat it as me exercising my muscles and bones. You should at least encourage me. Why are you attacking my enthusiasm for no reason? Enough, what exactly do you want? If you don't say it, the food in the dining room will be finished by Nia and the rest." Elder Yu rolled his eyes at Zhang Xiaohua and said, "Nothing much, I just wanted to tell you to wait for me under the tree where you practice tonight. I have something to tell you." Zhang Xiaohua drooped her head and said, "Elder Yu, you've defeated me. Didn't you say that I wouldn't go tonight? Do I need you to tell me?" Elder Yu's crafty schemes seemed to have succeeded as he said, "I deliberately told you because I wanted you to pay attention to it, and be mentally prepared. Secondly, there's a dish of pork belly this morning. It's said that it's very delicious. Nia said that you always fight with him for it. He saw me just now and told me to tell you to go in a little later. He'll let you in after he's done eating. It's about time now. You should go." Zhang Xiaohua looked at Elder Yu's disrespectful behavior and said fiercely, "Elder Yu, you're ruthless." After speaking, she dashed into the dining room like a wisp of smoke, as if there was a dog chasing after her. At night, Zhang Xiaohua waited under the tree as Elder Yu said. Elder Yu didn't say when he would come over, so he calmly practiced his set of martial arts. When he was done, he heard someone cheering beside him. He looked up and saw that it was Elder Yu. Elder Yu said with praise, "Zhang Xiaohua, I see that you're quite smart. These messy moves were actually practiced by you. It's almost like a real set of martial arts. It seems like I have to look at you in a new light." Zhang Xiaohua said embarrassedly, "Elder Yu, I don't have a choice. You said this morning that I really can't remember the entire set of martial arts. I can only practice it myself. It's better than not having any martial arts to practice." Elder Yu nodded and said, "Your determination to pursue martial arts is really good. There are thousands of paths to success in this world. As long as you can find one and persevere, even if there's no result, you won't regret it. One day, when you look back, you'll be able to console yourself with pride that you've worked hard." Zhang Xiaohua thanked him. "Thank you for your guidance, Elder Yu. I'll work hard myself." Elder Yu asked again, "Zhang Xiaohua, this set of martial arts of yours seems to be intermittent. You can't practice it in one go. It's like you can't finish a sentence and have to pause in the middle. Although the competition doesn't have to be particular about routines, an intermittent set of martial arts will cause you to not be able to practice to the best effect." Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly and said, "Elder Yu, I heard that the highest realm of martial arts is to have no moves. My intermittent set of martial arts might be an evolution towards that realm. Elder Yu smiled and said, I don't know about the realm of no moves. That's a legendary realm. Perhaps only the top few in the martial arts world have it? Perhaps it's just a legend. Zhang Xiaohua took the opportunity to ask, Elder Yu, do you have a set of martial arts manuals? I want to take a look. Can you lend it to me? Elder Yu was stunned and said, Set of martial arts manuals? I do. How come you know how to read them? That's impossible. Aren't you illiterate? Zhang Xiaohua said, Elder Yu, you're looking down on me too much. I was illiterate before, but that doesn't mean I won't be able to read now or in the future. Elder Yu thought for a moment and said, Oh right, the last time I went to your room, you were reading a book. Could it be that you learned how to read while you were recuperating? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, Elder Yu is wise. Elder Yu smiled and said, But martial arts manuals are different from reading. Being able to read doesn't mean you can understand them. Zhang Xiaohua said, Elder Yu, you don't have to worry about this. I've seen their collection of martial arts manuals at the Lotus Flower Escort Agency. I should be able to understand it. Elder Yu said, All right then. Come to my room when you have time. I'll find a set of martial arts manuals for you to read. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, Then I'll have to thank Elder Yu. She then asked, Oh right, Elder Yu, why are you looking for me tonight? Elder Yu looked at the full moon in the sky and said with a nostalgic tone, Once you're in the martial arts world, you can't imagine the splendor of the martial arts world. Once you're in the martial arts world, time will make you grow old. Do you know, Zhang Xiaohua, there's a saying that goes, a person in the martial arts world has no choice. Only you have one foot in the martial arts world. But whether or not you're willing, the winds and waves of the martial arts world will blow you away, leaving you no choice but to go with the flow. Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand and said, Elder Yu, why are you telling me this? I haven't thought of entering the martial arts world yet. Elder Yu looked at Zhang Xiaohua and said seriously, Zhang Xiaohua, as long as you want to practice martial arts and learn fist techniques, then you will inevitably be contaminated by the martial arts world. You can't avoid this. Although you're still young, you seem to have already chosen this path. Unless you give up on practicing martial arts now and wholeheartedly focus on farming in this villa. Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and said, I only practice martial arts to protect my family. Although I'm envious of the hot-bloodedness of the martial arts world, with my skills, it's still too early for me. Oh right, don't tell me you're going to tell me about the martial arts world today? Elder Yu said, Don't be anxious, Zhang Xiaohua. I'm telling you about the dangers of the martial arts world because I want you to know that if you insist on practicing martial arts, then you must have the awareness to enter the martial arts world. And to survive in the martial arts world, the most important thing is to have the means to protect your life. Zhang Xiaohua still didn't understand. Elder Yu sighed and said, Actually, I'm telling you so much because I want you to know the dangers of the martial arts world and dispel your thoughts of practicing martial arts. You don't seem to understand the severity of the injury on your right hand. Zhang Xiaohua asked anxiously, How serious is it, Elder Yu? Didn't the doctor say that I can still practice fist techniques? Elder Yu said, The doctor didn't lie to you. You can practice fist techniques, but your right hand is already crippled. It's not very possible for you to really compete with others. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked and said, What's going on? Elder Yu, you must explain it to me clearly. Thus Elder Yu told her about Zhang Xiaohua's injury from beginning to end. Zhang Xiaohua's face was ashen. She really didn't think too much about it, and thought that it would be fine as long as her bones healed. But now that she heard Elder Yu's words, she realized that things were far from as simple as she thought. Since her fist couldn't effectively attack others, then it was naturally crippled. Then what was the use of practicing fist techniques? Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua's expression was strange, Elder Yu didn't continue speaking and waited quietly for a while. When Zhang Xiaohua's emotions calmed down a little, he asked again, Then, do you still want to practice martial arts now? Zhang Xiaohua still nodded and said with a determined gaze, Practice martial arts, why not? Didn't you say just now that I've found my own path, I have to walk it to the end? Even if there's no result, I won't regret it. My right hand is crippled, but I still have my left hand. Even if I use my left hand, I can still practice fist techniques well and protect my family. Elder Yu's expression was as expected and said, Child, you're really a person who walks the path to the end. I came here today for 2 reasons, and I've already said one. Since you don't want to give up on practicing martial arts, then I have a second suggestion. Are you willing to listen? Zhang Xiaohua sucked in her lips and said, Of course I'm willing, Elder Yu. I know you're doing this for my own good. Elder Yu said with gratification, It's good that you know. I don't know how you moved me, but I actually find you pleasing to the eye. Then, he continued, Actually, in the martial arts world, the fist isn't the only thing that can save a life. Most people use weapons, such as sabers, spears, swords, halberds, and the like. Now that your fist is crippled, you can still practice with weapons. Zhang Xihua's eyes lit up and said, That's right, Elder Yu. You're really amazing you even know this. Elder Yu smiled bitterly and said, This is just common knowledge in the martial arts world. Only an inexperienced child like you wouldn't know. Don't admire me so much, it'll make me feel ashamed. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, I don't have a choice, I can only admire you. But what weapon do you think I should practice? Elder Yu said, Actually, you can practice any weapon, as long as you can practice it well. Although there's a saying in the martial arts world, the spear is the king of 100 weapons, 100 staff skills, 1,000 sabers skills, 10,000 sword skills, and so on, a person's aptitude and opportunities are different. Not all people practice the same weapon. In your right-hand situation, it's best to practice a staff technique. Zhang Xiaohua frowned. Staff technique? I've never seen anyone practice it before. Elder Yu, where can I find someone to teach me? Elder Yu was happy and said, With your aptitude and right hand, how can anyone teach you staff techniques? Don't even think about it. Zhang Xiaohua said worriedly, If no one teaches me such a simple staff technique, what's the point of saying so much? Elder Yu waited for a moment and said, I don't know staff techniques. Zhang Xiaohua pouted and said, If you don't know staff techniques, how are you going to teach me? Elder Yu said again, Our sex martial arts will not be taught to outsiders before we accept a disciple. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed and said, Master, please accept this little disciple's bow. She was about to kowtow when she finished speaking. However, she was stopped by Elder Yu's arm and said, Forget it. With your aptitude, I'll be angered to death if I teach you. Just save it and let me live for a few more years. When Zhang Xiaohua steadied himself, he continued, Although I can't take you as my disciple, it's a coincidence that I know a sword technique. I learned it by chance, so I can consider teaching it to you. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed and said, Really, Elder Yu, you can teach me this sword technique. Elder Yu smiled and said, This sword technique is not a secret of my sect, so I naturally have the right to decide. I can teach it to you. Zhang Xiaohua said, Then, thank you very much, Elder Yu. Why is there only one sword technique? Can't you teach me a few more? Don't be too stingy with me. Elder Yu didn't know whether to laugh or cry and said, Zhang Xiaohua, you lack the foundation of Jianghu. When will I enlighten you? This sword technique is different from a fist technique. A fist technique is a complete set that contains both offense and defense. It's a complete set that can strengthen the body. Some fist techniques can even be used to cultivate internal strength. On the other hand, most sword techniques are a complete set that can be used from start to finish like a fist technique. However, there is also a sword technique that has only one move. Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand and said, One move? How do you do it? You can't possibly do it like the fist technique I practice, right? Elder Yu explained, In a competition between weapons, it's important to use one move to defeat the enemy. If you use a sword for half a day to determine the winner, then you'll be at a disadvantage. In a competition between experts, it's fine if you don't move, but once you move, the winner will be determined. Zhang Xiaohua stuck out her tongue and said, Then Elder Yu's sword technique with only one move, is it a high-quality sword technique? Elder Yu smiled and said, whether it's high quality or not depends on the person using the sword. If I use it, then it's a killing sword technique, but if you use it, then it might be for others to watch. However, Zhang Xiaohua still asked, why don't I understand? It's just a sword technique, how can you practice it? Elder Yu said, whether this sword technique is a complete set or if there are other moves, I don't know. At that time, I only practiced a single move with 19 variations. Zhang Xiaohua was flabbergasted and said, one move? 19 variations? Elder Yu said with a smile. That's right. Just this one move has 19 variations and they're all offensive moves. I believe there are other defensive variations or moves, but I don't know of them. Zhang Xiaohua asked again. Then, Elder Yu, I want to ask, is there anything different between sword techniques and fist techniques? It's just that there are usually different variations in one sword technique. Elder Yu nodded and said, you're right. Normal sword techniques are like this. Only then did Zhang Xiaohua understand why she could understand fist techniques but not sword techniques. It turned out that there were so many things to pay attention to in the two techniques. Thinking that she could learn a more profound sword technique, Zhang Xiaohua became even more enthusiastic and said, Elder Yu, then please teach me now. Elder Yu said, I'm only telling you tonight. I can only teach you the specifics in the morning. You won't be able to see the subtle differences in the sword technique at night, so it's not easy to learn. Zhang Xiaohua said again. Then, Elder Yu, can you let me see the power of this sword technique? Elder Yu pondered for a moment, and suddenly pulled out his sword from the scabbard with one hand and pierced towards Zhang Xiaohua's throat from a strange angle. Although Zhang Xiaohua could feel the sword's momentum and direction, her body's reaction wasn't fast enough. Before Zhang Xiaohua could move, the tip of the sword was already at her chin. Zhang Xiaohua didn't pay attention to it, and threw a punch at the sword. The sword retracted and changed its angle at lightning speed, stopping in front of her eyes. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the sword tip that stopped in front of her and felt a sense of helplessness. This kind of mysterious sword technique was simply too powerful. Elder Yu saw that Zhang Xiaohua wasn't moving, so he put the sword back into the scabbard. He said, How is it? Zhang Xiaohua, is this move good? Zhang Xiaohua said in annoyance. Of course it's good against a rookie like me, but I wonder how others will fare? For example, Captain He. Elder Yu said proudly. In front of this sword technique, you and He Tianshu are the same. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes were filled with stars. She wanted to learn this powerful move as soon as possible, but Elder Yu wasn't in a hurry and said, Since I promised you and came looking for you, I will naturally teach you this sword technique. However, you have to promise me two things. Zhang Xiaohua said, Please tell me. Even if it's to wash your socks for 10 years, I'm willing to do it. Elder Yu said, First, you can't tell others that I taught you this sword technique. Even if others know that you know this sword technique, you can't say that I taught it to you. Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand, but she didn't ask. She only said, That means I can't tell Captain He and my second brother either. Elder Yu nodded. Zhang Xiaohua said again, Then, can I teach this sword technique to my second brother? Elder Yu thought for a moment and said, This sword technique is too sharp. If it's spread, it will cause a storm in the martial arts world. It's better not to spread it. Zhang Xiaohua agreed. Elder Yu continued, The second thing is that once this sword technique is used, there will be no return. Blood will definitely be spilled, and it will harm heaven and earth. I hope that you won't use it casually, and you won't use it unless your life is in danger. Do you understand? Zhang Xiaohua fell into deep thought. Seeing that she understood, Elder Yu said, I'm sure you understand now that this is a very powerful sword technique. I'm teaching it to you today so that you can save your life. I don't want you to bring it to greater heights. I hope you won't let me down and stain your sword with the blood of innocence. Zhang Xiaohua bowed sincerely and said, Elder Yu, I understand your intentions. I will definitely remember what you said tonight, and won't harm the innocent. Elder Yu smiled and said, Actually, with your temperament, I'm not worried. You've been practicing martial arts from morning to night. Although your aptitude isn't good, you're not afraid of hardships and work tirelessly. I'm sure you'll have a bright future in the future. Being able to learn this sword technique can be considered a bright pearl that doesn't need to be covered in dust. However, when you enter the martial arts world in the future, you have to be more careful and not be too hot-blooded. What you see may not be true. Zhang Xiaohua was confused. What you see may not be true. Please add it to your collection, thank you. 0. Chapter 111. The next morning, Zhang Xiaohua went to the tree as usual. Elder Yu hadn't moved yet, so Zhang Xiaohua stood still and started practicing his incomplete fist technique. Since he knew that Elder Yu would teach him a sword technique, Zhang Xiaohua didn't care as much as before about whether he would forget this fist technique. He was like a naughty child who was very concerned about his favorite toy and was suddenly given an even more interesting toy by an adult. That child's longing for his old toy would fade away, and he wouldn't cry as much as before even if he lost it. Although he had such thoughts, when Zhang Xiaohua finished practicing the fist technique that he had learned last night, he still felt a burst of excitement. After all, according to his experience, this incomplete fist technique had been tested by his powerful memory for an entire night. Since he was able to practice it now, he was sure that he wouldn't forget it in the future. Zhang Xiaohua almost wanted to howl at the sky. The heavens have pity on me, Zhang Xiaohua, Zhang Xiaohua, can finally practice the incomplete fist technique. Moreover, there was a sucker coming to teach him a sword technique that he had never dreamed of. This kind of good luck was truly indescribable. Could it be that it was the culmination of his good luck over the past 10 years? He couldn't help but raise his head to look at the rising sun and take a deep breath of the cool air. This was truly the blissful life of the countryside youth, Zhang Xiaohua. Just as he was immersed in his thoughts, a figure flashed past. Zhang Xiaohua raised his eyebrows. Although he couldn't see clearly, he could still feel that person's aura. It was undoubtedly Elder Yu. As expected, before that figure arrived, Elder Yu's voice could be heard. Zhang Xiaohua, you're already here? Zhang Xiaohua replied respectfully. Yes, Elder Yu. I've already practiced the fist technique. Elder Yu said. Hee, you're up pretty early. Looks like you're someone who can endure hardships. My judgment was right. Zhang Xiaohua muttered to herself. It's not that I don't want to sleep. The heavens have mercy on me. As soon as the sun rises, I have to wake up. I can't sleep anymore. Do you think I don't want to sleep more? Elder Yu naturally couldn't hear Zhang Xiaohua's silent criticism, so he continued. Actually, even though you're early, you should have said Elder Yu. I just arrived too out of courtesy. That would have made me feel that you're a sensible child who's considerate of others. You should remember that when you're dating girls in the future. Zhang Xiaohua touched her chin. She was very puzzled, but she still firmly remembered it in her heart. Elder Yu was very satisfied with Zhang Xiaohua's attitude and said, All right, let's not talk about it anymore. Come, let's go over there. My sword technique is extraordinary. We can't let He Tianshu and the others steal it. After saying that, he brought Zhang Xiaohua around a few corners and arrived behind a tree. Even if He Tianshu wanted to see them, he would have to look around a few corners. When the two of them stood still, Elder Yu said seriously, Zhang Xiaohua, I've already told you the pros and cons of this sword technique last night. Do you remember it clearly? Zhang Xiaohua also put away her other thoughts and said, Yes, Elder Yu. I've already remembered it. I'll definitely do as you say in the future. Elder Yu continued, I obtained this sword technique from a damaged sheepskin. I don't know the name of the sword technique, so you can call it the nameless sword technique. Actually, a simple sword technique is the same as a simple fist technique. It won't be able to withstand a single blow from a vast amount of internal energy. However, a sword technique uses the sword as a medium. If it's used properly, an ingenious sword technique might be able to break through a person's internal energy defense. This sword technique is also different from other sword techniques. It has its own set of incantations that can drive your internal energy to support the sword and body, achieving the best timing to attack. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua interrupted. But Elder Yu, I don't know how to use internal energy. Elder Yu frowned and said, Don't interrupt me when I'm talking. It's easy to disturb my thoughts. If I forget a sentence or two, don't blame me if your cultivation goes berserk in the future. Zhang Xiaohua covered her mouth and nodded vigorously, indicating that she understood. Then, Elder Yu shook his head and recited a famous sword technique. If you want to cultivate a divine technique, you have to castrate yourself with a blade. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she felt that it was really profound. Why couldn't she understand it? But if she couldn't even understand the first sentence, how was she going to cultivate the sword techniques in the future? She couldn't help but feel anxious. She covered her mouth with her left hand and waved her right hand vigorously. When Elder Yu saw this, he frowned and said, Zhang Xiaohua, what's the matter? Zhang Xiaohua let go of her left hand and took a deep breath before asking, Elder Yu, what do you mean by castrate yourself with a blade? Elder Yu was stunned and said, Why do you have to castrate yourself with a blade? Zhang Xiaohua was also stunned and said, Wasn't the first sentence of your sword technique if you want to cultivate a divine technique, you have to castrate yourself with a blade? When Elder Yu heard this, his old face turned red and he patted his forehead and said embarrassedly, My mistake. I've read too many wuxia novels. Reality and fantasy overlap. The sentence I said earlier wasn't right. I'll repeat it again. Thus, Elder Yu seriously recited that awkward sword technique again. It wasn't much, only a few dozen words, but Zhang Xiaohua couldn't understand it no matter how hard she tried. Elder Yu didn't explain and only let Zhang Xiaohua firmly remember it. With the previous example, how could Zhang Xiaohua dare to believe it? She let Elder Yu recite it 3 times. After she remembered it, she recited it a few more times in front of Elder Yu. She only relaxed when she saw Elder Yu nodding his head continuously. Then Elder Yu drew out his long sword and formed a sword stance as he explained the first change to Zhang Xiaohua. Everything in the world seemed easy when others did it, but it was difficult when you did it yourself. Elder Yu explained the changes in this sword technique twice and Zhang Xiaohua already understood it. However, when she picked up the branch and tried to execute it herself, she couldn't do what Elder Yu wanted no matter how hard she tried. After repeating this a few times, Elder Yu was annoyed. He looked at the sky and said, Zhang Xiaohua, let's stop here for today. Go back and think about it carefully. Try to figure out the changes in the sword technique. That sword technique has to be constantly recited, so you must remember it well. Zhang Xiaohua asked awkwardly. I know the changes in the sword technique, so I will naturally practice it diligently. However, I don't know anything about this sword technique. Elder Yu didn't think much of it and said, The sword technique is the general principle of the changes in the sword technique. I will explain it to you in detail when you have a slight understanding of the sword technique. This general principle is related to the use of internal energy. Right now, you don't have any internal energy, so it won't be good if I explain too much. You just have to memorize it well. Zhang Xiaohua finally understood and nodded in agreement. Then Zhang Xiaohua asked again, Elder Yu, you promised me yesterday that you would let me borrow your fist technique manual. I wonder when is the right time? Elder Yu thought for a moment and said, Let's talk about it after you have comprehended the first change. Looking at a fist technique manual will distract you. This is your first time coming into contact with a sword technique, so let's talk about it after you have made some progress. Zhang Xiaohua thought about it and felt that it made sense. Moreover, perfecting this fist technique wasn't something that could be done overnight. She had already waited for several months, so there was no rush. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua kept revising the sword technique in her mind for the entire day. Whenever she had time, she would think about the changes in the sword technique. When she was free in the room, she would take out a tree branch and continuously practice it. However, she still couldn't perfectly execute it. Actually, this wasn't only the first time Zhang Xiaohua came into contact with a sword technique, so she couldn't understand it very well. Moreover, his right hand was injured, so his fingers couldn't be as nimble as usual. He couldn't control the strength and angle well, so it was very difficult for him to execute the first step of this sword technique. After dinner, Elder Yu slowly demonstrated the variations of the sword technique under the cover of dusk. He also explained the things that Zhang Xiaohua needed to pay attention to and the techniques to execute the sword technique. Zhang Xiaohua listened attentively, and combined it with his own thoughts during the day. When he executed the sword technique, it looked quite good. However, Elder Yu still shook his head. Zhang Xiaohua practiced for a while more, but there was no progress. She couldn't help but feel discouraged. She looked at her right hand and thought to herself, "Is my right hand really crippled? From Elder Yu's words, this move doesn't seem too difficult. Why can't I practice it well?" Then, her eyes lit up and she asked, "Elder Yu, look, my right hand isn't very nimble. Can I use my left hand to execute it?" Elder Yu didn't nod as she expected. Instead, he said quietly, "Zhang Xiaohua, are you trying to avoid some difficulties when you encounter them? If that's the case, then it's fine if you don't learn the sword technique. Why do you have to suffer?" Zhang Xiaohua argued. "No, Elder Yu, I just feel that my right hand is too clumsy. I can't control the strength and position of the branch. That's why I thought of using my left hand." Elder Yu smiled. "Actually, I've already thought of the problem that you're thinking about. It's just that most of the sword techniques in the pugilistic world are right-handed. There are very few left-handed sword techniques. These sword techniques are also recorded with the right hand as an example. The sword technique that I obtained is also recorded with the right hand. Moreover, the meridians of the left and right hand are different. The internal energy circulation in the sword technique is also recorded with the right hand. Naturally, I can't use the sword technique to teach you with the right hand. Moreover, where did I get my left arm from? Without a left arm, I can't change the sword technique from a right-hand sword to a left-hand sword." Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was silent, Elder Yu continued, "Therefore, I can't teach you how to use the sword with the left hand. Actually, there's another reason why I'm teaching you this sword technique." Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled, so he asked, "There's another reason?" Elder Yu nodded his head solemnly and said, "The most important part of this sword art is the palm and wrist. Your right hand is already injured, and if you don't train it properly, it might not recover. I'm imparting this sword art to you because I want you to train your right hand diligently. When you train for a long time, perhaps the heavens will open their eyes and let your right hand recover? If you retreat in the face of difficulties now, I reckon that not only will you not have any achievements in swordsmanship, but you will also not succeed in fist techniques." Zhang Xiaohua finally understood and bowed deeply. "Elder Yu, thank you for your kind intentions. This little one understands. I'll practice properly now." Elder Yu smiled. "All right, there's no need to be so pretentious. It's only when you're able to practice well that you're truly capable." Zhang Xiaohua nodded his head and picked up the branch to practice again and again. He gradually got better and better, so much so that he didn't even notice Elder Yu's departure. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was practicing, the branch suddenly fell down. Zhang Xiaohua was startled awake and felt that his right hand was in extreme pain. Not only was his wrist sore, but his 5 fingers were also in extreme pain. Zhang Xiaohua's heart couldn't help but tremble. Could it be that the wound had ruptured again? He could only stand there and didn't dare to practice anymore. Only after a long time did the pain slowly lessen. Zhang Xiaohua knew that the wound didn't rupture again. However, there was a limit to how much he could train his fingers. He had overdone it today, so he had to be more careful in the future. If he overdid it every day, not only would it not achieve good results, it might even cause his fingers to become deformed and his bones to rupture again. Since he couldn't practice his sword technique, Zhang Xiaohua thought of his fist technique. Thus, he stood still and executed his 100 fist techniques one by one. Even though it wasn't continuous, it was still very satisfying. After he finished practicing his fist technique, Zhang Xiaohua saw that it was getting late. He used his left hand to carry the branch and slowly walked back. Zhang Xiaohua swung the branch as he walked. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat. Even though Elder Yu stopped him from trying to use his left hand, Elder Yu didn't say that he couldn't use his left hand. Even though the meridians in his left and right hands were different, he didn't have any internal energy right now and couldn't use any sword techniques. That meant that the sword techniques in his right hand could also be executed with his left hand. Elder Yu couldn't teach him how to use his left hand because he didn't have a left hand and couldn't understand the changes in his right hand. So why couldn't he use his left hand to execute the changes in his right hand? The more Zhang Xiaohua thought about it, the more excited he became, and the more he felt that it was possible. He looked around and felt that there was no one around. Thus, he placed the lantern to the side and walked to the side with the branch. He carefully thought about Elder Yu's teachings and slowly executed them with his left hand. After using his left hand for the past few months, even though Zhang Xiaohua wasn't born left-handed, his left hand was now more agile than a left-handed person. Elder Yu's teachings in the morning were actually executed as smoothly as flowing water when Zhang Xiaohua slowly executed them with his left hand. The first time was still a little clumsy and uncoordinated, but after he finished, the next few times became more and more natural. This unexpected discovery made Zhang Xiaohua extremely happy. It was as if he had found another way to practice his sword technique. After he practiced a few more times and confirmed that he could really use his left hand, he picked up the lantern and went back to his room to rest. When Zhang Xiaohua woke up in the morning, he wanted to tell Elder Yu the good news as soon as possible. However, when he started practicing again, he encountered the same problem as when he was practicing his fist technique. That was, the changes in the sword technique he executed with his left hand were different from what Elder Yu taught him. There were many deviations. Fortunately, Zhang Xiaohua didn't forget anything this time. Zhang Xiaohua was speechless as he looked at the sword technique that he had used that had changed beyond recognition. The thought of reporting the good news to Elder Yu had been forcefully extinguished. Forget it. Rather than being mocked by others, I might as well enjoy it myself. Thinking that Elder Yu was about to arrive, Zhang Xiaohua stopped practicing with his left hand and stretched his muscles. Just as he was about to execute the 100 moves of his fist technique, Elder Yu arrived. Elder Yu asked about last night's practice. Zhang Xiaohua honestly told him about the condition of his right hand. He opened his mouth and wanted to say that he was using his left hand, but in the end, he didn't. When Elder Yu heard Zhang Xiaohua's words, his expression became serious. He grabbed Zhang Xiaohua's right hand and carefully touched it. And you practiced a little too much yesterday. Just as you guessed, your right hand is a little stiff. Rest for today and think about the changes during the day. Practice again at night. After he finished speaking, he once again reminded Zhang Xiaohua not to practice his sword technique during the day. Only then did he float away and go straight to the dining room. Seeing that she didn't have to practice her sword technique in the morning, Zhang Xiaohua could only continue practicing her fist technique. She practiced the 100 moves over and over again. The more she practiced, the smoother it became. This made her even more determined to complete the fist technique as soon as possible. She was very much looking forward to the feeling of practicing it from beginning to end once she completed the fist technique. After she finished practicing her fist technique, she looked at the sky. There was still some time before breakfast. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but put her thoughts on the sword in her left hand. Without hesitation, Zhang Xiaohua's figure disappeared into the forest. Holding a tree branch in her left hand, she executed the changes of the sword technique that she had memorized. Over and over again, her execution was very smooth. It seemed to be at the same level as Elder Yu's that day. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was immersed in the world of the sword in her left hand, suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua felt that there seemed to be a warm current flowing along her left arm following the changes of the sword technique. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but stop. But when she tried to sense it carefully, there was no trace of it. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua slowly executed it again. Still, she didn't feel anything. It seemed to be her imagination. Zhang Xiaohua quickly executed it again. Still, there was nothing. Zhang Xiaohua shook her head. She really thought that it was her imagination. However, when Zhang Xiaohua continuously executed the sword technique again, she inadvertently felt the same feeling again. Only then did she know that she wasn't wrong. Thinking about it carefully, the appearance of this warm current seemed to be related to the speed at which she executed the sword technique. Just as she was about to try different speeds to find the warm current, a shout interrupted her. Zhang Xiaohua, where are you? Zhang Xiaohua tilted her head to listen. It was Nie Xiaoer's voice. She couldn't help but be confused. Why did this guy suddenly appear? When she came out of the forest, she realized that the sun was already high up in the sky. Everyone else was preparing to go work in the herb field. He hadn't even eaten breakfast yet. Seeing He Tianchu's concerned gaze, Zhang Xiaohua said embarrassedly, Captain I was practicing fist techniques in the forest and forgot the time. He Tianchu said. Zhang Xiaohua, do you know what it means to be hasty? Some things can't be done overnight. You have to learn to be down to earth and walk step by step. I support hard work, but I don't agree to practicing martial arts without using your body. You've been hiding in the forest by yourself these past few days. Are you still practicing your fist techniques? Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, You can say that. He Tianchu smiled and said, I know that you're afraid that we'll laugh at you for practicing those incomplete fist techniques. Practice it if you want, but you have to think about your body. Your right hand hasn't completely recovered yet, so you have to pay attention to rest. If your right hand is worn out again, even if it's incomplete fist techniques, you can't practice them anymore. Zhang Xiaohua respectfully said, Captain I understand. I'll be careful in the future. He Tianchu patted her shoulder and said, Okay, it's good that you know. If you're not afraid of being embarrassed in the future, you should practice with us. We promise we won't laugh at you. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the three people beside her and couldn't help but smile. She still said, Forget it, Captain I'll practice by myself. He Tianchu said, Okay, up to you. I'll have Nie Xiaoer bring some breakfast to your room. Hurry up and eat, then go work in the herb field. 0. Chapter 112. Zhang Xiaohua felt a burst of warmth when he heard the faint tone and the ordinary words. Although it was a normal concern, there was a saying, Don't be afraid of not knowing the goods, be afraid of comparing the goods. He Tianchu and the others' daily care for Zhang Xiaohua was immediately different from the grievances Zhang Xiaohua suffered in the Qingyi and Little Hat room. It was no wonder that Zhang Xiaohua was grateful. After reminding Zhang Xiaohua, He Tianchu and the others hurriedly left. The daily cultivation of the herbal field was still very easy to handle. In fact, it didn't matter if Zhang Xiaohua wasn't there. However, those seeds that had never sprouted were still a big mountain in He Tianchu's heart. He couldn't rest until he removed them. Zhang Xiaohua saw that they had left, and hurried back to the house. Although the food in the house was simple, Zhang Xiaohua still ate it with relish. He then went out to be a monk and hit his own clock. During the lunch break, Zhang Xiaohua stayed in his house. He took a branch and carefully simulated the feeling that he found in the morning. Sure enough, when his speed reached a certain level, the warm current immediately appeared. Zhang Xiaohua had a realization in his heart. Although the reason for the warm current's appearance was still unclear, one thing was certain. That was, the changes of this sword move should be performed at this speed. It was the best. Since he had this understanding, Zhang Xiaohua continued to perform the changes of this sword move at this speed. The warm current also continued to appear. Zhang Xiaohua then realized that from the beginning of his sword move changes, the warm current came out from a certain place on his left shoulder. As the sword move changes were performed, the warm current flowed along his shoulder to his palm. It didn't disappear until the sword move changes were performed and the warm current flowed to the branch in his left hand. After practicing for an entire afternoon, Zhang Xiaohua finally memorized the sword move changes with his left hand. The speed of the sword move had also stabilized. When he reached the point where he could casually perform a sword move change, the warm current would appear. Only then did he stop. The practice at night was out of Zhang Xiaohua's expectations. Under Elder Yu's supervision, Zhang Xiaohua performed the sword move with his right hand again. He originally thought that he wouldn't be able to succeed like before. However, perhaps it was because he had been practicing with his left hand, but Zhang Xiuhua's right hand was also fixed at the same speed. Unexpectedly, he was able to perform the sword move successfully. Even though it was just a beginner, and there were many areas that could be improved, Zhang Xiaohua's right hand had just recovered from its injury. It should have something to do with the inflexibility of his fingers. Elder Yu was also very surprised. When he saw Zhang Xiaohua practicing in the morning, he thought that with his aptitude, he would need a few more days of practice before he could master the sword move changes. However, it seemed like he had underestimated him. Elder Yu was very happy in his heart. He let Zhang Xiaohua practice again. When he saw that he had really mastered it, he said, "Zhang Xiaohua, I didn't think that you would be able to master it so quickly. This is a bit out of my expectations. However, you don't have to be proud. I only practiced this move for half a day. My aptitude is very ordinary in the Jianghu. If it was someone else with talent and intelligence, they would probably be able to master it after watching it twice." Zhang Xiaohua naturally didn't feel any sense of pride. He immediately said, "Elder Yu, don't worry. I know my own aptitude. This is the result of practicing many times." Elder Yu was very satisfied. Actually, there are times when a person's strength is limited. You don't have to worry too much about it. Just do your best. You must have gone through a lot of hardships to be able to learn the first move. I also know that. Since you've already learned the first move, I'll teach you the second one in a while. However, you shouldn't exhaust your injured bones at this stage. As the saying goes, more haste, less speed. You must remember this. Zhang Xiaohua was very happy when he heard that he could learn the second move. He didn't pay too much attention to Elder Yu's words. Actually, Elder Yu had wanted to teach Zhang Xiaohua the first move in the morning. However, he was very happy when he saw that Zhang Xiaohua had learned the first move. He took advantage of the moonlight and practiced the second move in the forest. When Zhang Xiaohua roughly looked through it, he explained it in detail. When he saw that Zhang Xiaohua's brows had relaxed, he knew that she had understood it. Only then did he slowly practice it again and let Zhang Xiaohua look at it carefully again. Although there were 19 variations to this sword move, they were all based on this sword move. The first variation was the hardest to learn. After learning the first variation, the other variations would all be very similar. Naturally, it would be very easy to learn the second variation. Therefore, Elder Yu spent much less time teaching the second variation than the first variation. It was a pity that Elder Yu had overestimated Zhang Xiaohua's comprehension ability. Although Zhang Xiaohua should know how to practice it, or perhaps he had already learned it in his heart, the branch in his hands couldn't move according to Elder Yu's requirements no matter what. Under Elder Yu's tightly furrowed brows, Zhang Xiaohua helplessly put down the branch. After all, his right hand was starting to hurt again. He couldn't neglect the fundamentals and focus on trifles. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's dejection, Elder Yu helplessly patted him on the shoulder. "It's fine. You should think about it more in your heart. This isn't the first time you've done this. Take a rest and continue practicing tomorrow." After he finished speaking, he turned and left. Zhang Xiaohua felt a little upset when he saw Elder Yu leave. No normal person liked to be looked down upon. Even if he knew that his aptitude wasn't good, he couldn't accept being looked down upon by others again and again. Thus, he picked up the branch again. However, this time, he had learned his lesson. He didn't use his right hand to practice it, but his left hand first. He first simulated the changes in his left hand in his mind before slowly moving his left hand. After repeating this a few times, he finally memorized the changes and found the feeling of noon. He followed the speed of the first move and as expected, the warm current appeared again, just like noon. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed. He knew that he had found the right path. Thus, he used the moonlight to practice. When he learned the second move, he practiced the first one again. He repeated this process repeatedly. It was as if Elder Yu was teaching him to use his left hand. The next day, Zhang Xiaohua still practiced a set of 100 incomplete fist moves and practiced the 2 sword moves while waiting for Elder Yu to arrive. However, after waiting for a while and seeing that no one was coming, Zhang Xiaohua didn't wait any longer. Zhang Xiaohua's right hand had recovered after a long rest, and was no longer sore. He picked up the branch again and repeated the sword moves in his mind as he practiced the second move at a certain speed. It was strange. He couldn't complete the move no matter what last night, but after a long rest, he was able to perform it this morning. Although it wasn't as smooth as moving clouds and flowing water, he still managed to learn it. Zhang Xiaohua seemed to have realized that to learn the second move, he had to use his left arm first. He had to learn it before he could use his right hand. This was really strange. Could it be that his right hand was injured? When Elder Yu checked on Zhang Xiaohua's progress at night, he also found it very strange. He couldn't help but blush. It was said that one should teach according to the student's aptitude. It seemed that his teaching method was wrong. Perhaps he really wasn't suitable for teaching. Why couldn't he explain such a simple change clearly? He still had to let Zhang Xiaohua go back and think about it carefully. Only then would he be able to learn it. Thus, he said a little embarrassedly, "Zhang Xiaohua, is my teaching not good?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. "No, Elder Yu. You taught me very well." Elder Yu said, "AI, don't say any more. I've taught a few disciples in the past, but they couldn't learn well and didn't make any name for themselves in the martial arts world. Today, I'll teach you a few sword moves, but you still can't understand them." Zhang Xiaohua was even more confused. He could only say, "Elder Yu, I'm very grateful that you're the only one teaching me sword moves. If I can't learn it, it's because my aptitude isn't good enough. I remember telling my second brother that if others can learn it once, I'll practice it 10 times, 20 times, 100 times until I learn it." When Elder Yu heard this, he agreed in his heart. "You're right. Although there's no lack of talented people in the martial arts world, they're still very rare. People like you and I are just ordinary people. Naturally, we have to put in more effort than others in order to achieve good results. Zhang Xiaohua, you've done very well." After that, Elder Yu didn't consider whether it was his teaching method or Zhang Xiaohua's comprehension. Just like a few days ago, he carefully explained the sword moves and slowly demonstrated them. When Zhang Xiaohua felt that she understood, he turned around and left, leaving Zhang Xiaohua alone to practice. He still didn't appear the next morning, letting Zhang Xiaohua experience it herself. He only appeared the next night to check on her learning progress. In this way, Zhang Xiaohua learned one move a day until she learned the 16th move. However, there was a problem with the 17th move. After Elder Yu taught her, Zhang Xiaohua memorized it in her heart. She could use her left hand, but the warm current didn't appear. Zhang Xiaohua thought that there was a problem with her speed. She tried again and again, but the warm current still didn't appear. Then, Zhang Xiaohua tried to use her right hand, but it just didn't work. There were always some details that she couldn't handle. Zhang Xiaohua practiced alone for another 2 days, but she still couldn't learn the 17th move. Elder Yu thought about it, and concluded that it was because her right hand hadn't fully recovered and wasn't as nimble as a normal person. Thus, he began to teach her the 18th and 19th moves. As Elder Yu expected, Zhang Xiaohua still couldn't learn the last 2 moves. After a few days, Elder Yu called Zhang Xiaohua to the forest and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, I've already taught you the 19 moves. Actually, I'm already very satisfied that you can learn 16 moves. To be honest, I thought that you could learn half of them, but you've already greatly exceeded my expectations." Zhang Xiaohua felt a little sour in her heart when she heard Elder Yu's words. However, the situation was as such and she couldn't refute it at all. Elder Yu continued, "You should have already memorized the remaining 3 moves. When your right hand fully recovers, you can continue to practice. Actually, the reason why I'm teaching you this move is to save your life. If you don't provoke someone too powerful, I believe that these 16 moves should be able to save your life. Also, what you've learned now is only the tip of the iceberg and doesn't have much power. You still have to memorize the sword technique diligently. When you learn inner strength one day, you'll be able to use it with the sword technique to display the true power of this sword technique." Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but ask, "Then what is its true power like?" Elder Yu smiled and said, "Look." As he spoke, he used all his strength to stab the big tree in front of him. The sharp edge of the sword pierced 3 centimeters into the tree. Then, Elder Yu circulated his chi and used a sword move to stab the tree. With a piercing sound, the long sword pierced deeply into the tree as if it was going to pierce through it. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. The difference was too big. Elder Yu saw Zhang Xiaohua's expression and naturally knew what she was thinking. He said, "See, Zhang Xiaohua? If you don't learn inner strength, you're like a frog at the bottom of a well. You'll always be in a small circle and will never be able to understand the power of inner strength. Even if you learn the best sword technique in the world, the exquisite sword moves are still just a form. Without the soul of inner strength, you can never be considered a first-rate expert." Looking at Zhang Xiaohua's disappointed expression, he said, "I know you want to learn inner strength, but I can't teach it to you. I hope that you'll have the chance to learn a profound inner strength cultivation method in the future. Alright, this is all I can teach you. Practice well and hope that this sword move can help you in the future." With that, he flicked his sleeves and turned to leave. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but call out, "Elder Yu." Elder Yu turned around and asked, "What's the matter?" Zhang Xiaohua opened his mouth and said after a while, "Thank you, Elder Yu." Elder Yu smiled and said, "No need, Zhang Xiaohua. Practice well and I hope you'll succeed." With that, he floated away. Looking at Elder Yu's one-armed figure, Zhang Xiaohua felt extremely grateful. He wasn't related to Elder Yu in any way, and they didn't see each other often in the past. Yet he had received such a huge favor from Elder Yu, and he had even imparted a sword technique to him. Although Elder Yu didn't mind it, how could he not take it seriously? Actually, Zhang Xiaohua wanted to tell Elder Yu about the sword in her left hand, but she didn't know where to start. Most of the 16 transformations on her left hand had changed beyond recognition. If she told Elder Yu now, would she let him know that she wasn't a good-for-nothing? If she could comprehend the side path, could she also use a sword with her left hand? However, when she thought about the might of Elder Yu's inner strength sword move, she didn't want to say it. What was her little bit of cleverness? She shouldn't show it off. However, Zhang Xiaohua really wanted to ask Elder Yu about the warm current. After standing for a while, Elder Yu was already far away. Only then did Zhang Xiaohua gather her thoughts and pick up the branch to practice in the forest. After practicing the transformations of the sword move, she felt bored and her right hand was sore, so she switched to her left hand. When she practiced the sword move with her left hand, it was different. The warm current flowed through her left arm, making it feel very comfortable. After the 16 transformations of the sword move had been mutated by Zhang Xiaohua, she could actually link them together. From the first to the 16th transformations, in addition to the changes in her footwork, it was really like a set of sword moves. Practicing to her heart's content, she started practicing non-stop and entered a very peaceful state. She only wanted to wave the sword in her left hand around, as though she was born for the sword. She practiced from the first to the 16th transformations, then continued to practice the first transformations. After practicing for a long time, Zhang Xiaohua felt that there was a stuffy feeling in her chest. She wanted to spit it out, but she couldn't find a way to vent it. As the sword moved, she seemed to have found a target. Zhang Xiaohua opened her mouth and let out a long sigh of relief. Then, she followed the sword move and stabbed forward with the branch in her left hand. The warm current in her left arm naturally flowed along with it. Just as the branch was about to hit the tree in front of her, she heard a muffled sound and the branch actually pierced into the trunk. Then, she broke into pieces and fell to the ground. Only then did Zhang Xiaohua wake up from her dream. She stared blankly at the branch in her hand and then at the branch in front of her. She couldn't believe that she had done this. If Elder Yu had used his strength to push the sword 3 inches into the tree trunk, Zhang Xiaohua felt that if she used her strength, she might be able to push the sword 5 inches into the tree trunk. However, it was impossible for Zhang Xiaohua to do it like how Elder Yu had used his internal energy. Furthermore, it was impossible for Zhang Xiaohua to do it. Was she considered an expert? However, when she walked forward and used her thumb and index finger to pinch the branch, she easily pulled it out without using much strength. Only then did she see that there was a hole in the tree trunk that was neither deep nor shallow. It was just a hole. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but laugh at herself. She looked at herself as a poor person who had just received a few dozen taels of silver. She thought that she knew that she was the richest person in the world, but she didn't know that this amount of silver was a joke in the eyes of the real rich. She thought that her martial arts were so good that she could push the branch into the tree trunk, but now, it seemed that it was just a small hole. Shaking her head, Zhang Xiaohua casually threw away the branch in her hand. Feeling that the sky was getting dark, she picked up the lantern and slowly walked back into the house. Only that small hole was left in the tree trunk. The pitiful Zhang Xiaohua was regretting his arrogance, but he didn't know that he had really underestimated himself this time. Even if it was Elder Yu, he wouldn't dare to say that he could push the branch into the tree trunk and leave a hole. If Elder Yu saw Zhang Xiaohua's sword, his eyes would definitely pop out. It was a pity that Zhang Xiaohua only saw the sharpness of the sword. Although he knew that the blunt part of the branch wouldn't be easy to push into the tree trunk, his usual attitude confirmed that he had made a mistake in his judgment. Sigh, the details determine success or failure. Zhang Xiaohua seemed to still be very inexperienced. He still had a long way to go. However, Zhang Xiaohua, who was walking on the road, didn't have this awareness. He had long abandoned the joy from before and was muttering in his heart. I've already learned this sword technique from Elder Yu, so when should I go to Elder Yu to get the fist manual? 0. Chapter 113. The next day, it was raining heavily. After the autumn rain and the cold, the weather had already turned cold. There wasn't much work to do in the medicine field, so Tianshu brought Nie Xiao Er and the rest to walk around the medicine field before returning. Zhang Xiaohua was still thinking about her fist technique. When Tianshu returned, she couldn't wait to find out where Elder Yu lived. She opened an umbrella and walked towards the backyard. Elder Yu lived quite a distance away from Zhang Xiaohua's courtyard, but it was very close to the dining hall. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but think maliciously, was it because Elder Yu was old and couldn't walk properly? Was it because he didn't want to delay the meal? Even with Elder Yu's martial arts skills, he wasn't at the level where he could walk in the rain without getting wet. Thus, he stayed in the house and didn't go out. Zhang Xiaohua knocked on the door and entered the house. Elder Yu's house was very simple. It was even cleaner than Zhang Xiaohua's house, but there were a few more cabinets. When Zhang Xiaohua entered the house, Elder Yu was sitting cross-legged on the Kong bed. When he saw that it was Zhang Xiaohua, he slowly got off the bed and looked at Zhang Xiaohua's wet shoulders. Zhang Xiaohua, it's raining so heavily. Why didn't you stay in the house and think about that sword technique? What are you doing here? Could it be that you've improved again after a night? Zhang Xiaohua bitterly smiled and said, Elder Yu, do you think I'm a genius that only appears once every 50 years? Just those 16 transformations will take me a lifetime to learn, and I won't be able to master them like the back of my hand, not to mention the other 3 transformations. Look at my hand. As she spoke, she raised her right hand in front of Elder Yu and bent her fingers a few times. She continued, Perhaps I'll only be able to learn the essence of the other 3 variations when my right hand can fully form a fist. Elder Yu comforted Zhang Xiaohua at this time. You don't have to give up. When the heavens are about to give you a great responsibility, they must first test your will. Perhaps this is the heavens' test for you. Zhang Xiaohua declined to comment and said, I've read this sentence in a book before. Maybe. Then, he frowned and said, Elder Yu, don't change the topic. I'm here today to borrow your fist manual. You promised me before. Elder Yu slapped his forehead and said, Look at my memory, I'm really old now. I almost forgot. However, the fist art you are learning. Zhang Xiaohua smiled. Elder Yu, are you trying to persuade me again? Elder Yu fell silent. Zhang Xiaohua said, In life, one must have some goals. Before I came to Pingyang City, I wanted to practice martial arts. If I gave up because of the injury on my arm, wouldn't it be too hasty? Moreover, my injuries aren't that serious. Elder Yu, don't you only have a right arm? Aren't you also a martial arts expert? Elder Yu smiled bitterly and said, I knew you would say this to me. Actually, you only know one thing and not the other. First of all, before I was injured, my martial arts were only second-rate in Jianghu. Now that I have lost my left arm, my martial arts have been reduced to less than 60% of my peak. Moreover, I only got injured after I achieved great success in my martial arts. Although it affected my martial arts, it wasn't as serious as yours. For someone like you to have such a big problem in your palm before you started practicing martial arts, it would be difficult for you to achieve great success no matter what martial arts you practice. It's just like how a person's family has declined before he reached adulthood. If you want him to revive his family business, it will be extremely difficult. However, if he succeeds in starting his own business and his family falls, it will naturally be much easier for him to start his own business. It will even be more glorious than the former. When Zhang Xiaohua heard Elder Yu's words, her face was as gloomy as the sky outside. After a while she said, But I'm still unwilling to accept it. Elder Yu sighed and said, Seeing how crazily you practice, I knew you wouldn't be able to let it go. That's why I taught you the sword moves. Do as you wish. The martial arts manual is on the bookshelf over there. I haven't looked at it in a long time. Zhang Xiaohua followed his words and walked to a bookshelf. Sure enough, there were many books on the shelf. When she looked carefully, there were martial arts manuals and sword manuals. The collection was quite extensive. However, when Zhang Xiaohua flipped through the 10 or so manuals, she realized that they were all martial arts manuals that she had seen at the Lotus Flower Escort Agency before. They were also some of the more popular martial arts manuals in the martial arts world. Elder Yu also looked at Zhang Xiaohua flipping through this and that and felt that it was strange. He asked, You can take whichever book you want to read. Remember to return it to me. Zhang Xiaohua turned around and asked, Elder Yu, are there any other martial arts manuals? These seem to be common martial arts manuals in the martial arts world. Elder Yu smiled and said, Zhang Xiaohua, although these martial arts manuals are common in the martial arts world, they aren't something that just anyone can find. You can pick one and look at it first. If there's anything you don't understand, feel free to ask me. I naturally don't have any of the martial arts manuals in the sect, so you don't have to look through them. If I could teach you, I would have told you long ago. Zhang Xiaohua asked curiously, Then can you tell me what martial arts are taught in the sect? Or martial arts manuals? Elder Yu thought for a while, but still shook his head and said, These things, if you're fated, you'll know sooner or later. If not, what's the use of telling you? It'll only add to your worries. Then, he pointed to the martial arts manuals and said, Don't look down on these manuals. Although they're the most common, they're also the most practical. After so many years and so many people's tests, if you can master them, it'll be an amazing thing. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but blush and said, This, Elder Yu, you know my aptitude. I always forget the moves, so there's nothing I can do about it. Elder Yu blinked and said, Then all the more you should read through a manual properly. Only then will you be able to memorize it properly. Zhang Xiaohua said, It's not like that, Elder Yu. Sigh, forget it, I'll just read this one. Seeing that she couldn't win against Elder Yu, Zhang Xiaohua didn't intend to explain and casually took out a manual. She didn't even look at the name and put it away. She bid farewell to Elder Yu and returned with a lack of interest. Elder Yu looked at Zhang Xiaohua's thin back and shook his head helplessly. He said in a low voice, This child, sigh, she's really a little stubborn. Since he had some emotions, he stopped meditating and walked down from the Kong bed to the bookshelf that Zhang Xiaohua was looking at. Looking at the dusty bookshelf, Elder Yu couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. He didn't know how long it had been since he looked at these things. Ever since he was injured, he had lost a lot of his ambition and didn't have the same motivation as Zhang Xiaohua. Perhaps he should do something else? After Elder Yu finished sighing, he turned around and suddenly found a book wedged between the bookshelf. He carefully pulled it out with a stick and found that it was another martial arts manual. He didn't know when it had fallen in there. Elder Yu blew the dust off it and casually placed it back on the shelf. Zhang Xiaohua held on to the manual and held on to the umbrella as she walked back. She was very depressed. To be honest, the greater the expectation, the greater the disappointment. She originally thought that she could get a few manuals from Elder Yu that she hadn't learned before to make up for her moves. Who knew that she would end up empty-handed? This result was something that she had never expected. But when he thought about it, this was normal. The Lotus Flower Escort Agency's martial arts training hall was a place for teaching and educating people. Naturally, there would be a sufficient collection of fist art manuals. Elder Yu, on the other hand, was merely interested in it. Since he could finish reading all the fist art manuals in the martial arts training hall, Elder Yu shouldn't have any new discoveries. In fact, it would be strange if Elder Yu really found a fist art manual that he hadn't seen in the escort agency. She had been too impatient before. Thinking up to this point, Zhang Xiaohua's depression lessened by half. The only thing left was where to find a manual. Did she have to go to the Misty School to find one? This was too unrealistic. Not long after, Zhang Xiaohua walked back to the small courtyard. The moment she entered the small courtyard, Zhang Xiaohua saw that the door to her room was open from afar. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but feel strange. Could it be that she didn't close the door when she went out? That's not right. She seemed to have closed the door before leaving. When she got closer, she heard a familiar voice coming from the room. Although she couldn't hear it clearly due to the sound of the rain, Zhang Xiaohua still quickened her footsteps and ran to the door, shouting, "Second brother, is that you?" As expected, Zhang Xiaohua's voice sounded from inside the room. "Xiaohua, you're back?" When Zhang Xiaohua entered the room, she saw that other than Zhang Xiaohu, He Tianshu, and Li Jinfeng were also in the room. Zhang Xiaohu walked to the door and took the umbrella from Zhang Xiaohua's hands and helped her put it away. He was as attentive as when he was in Zhang Xiaohu's room at the escort agency. He Tianshu stood in the middle of the room. When he saw that Zhang Xiaohua had returned, he said to Zhang Xiaohu and Li Jinfeng, "Zhang Xiaohua is back, so I won't keep you company. You're welcome to come by often in the future." Zhang Xiaohu and Li Jinfeng quickly said, "Thank you, Captain He. Let's talk more in the future if there's a chance." He Tianshu nodded at Zhang Xiaohua and said, "Take good care of your brother and friends." Then, he went back to his room. Zhang Xiaohua watched as He Tianshu left. He turned around and asked excitedly, "Second brother, why did you suddenly come to my place today?" "Oh right, young Master Li, are you free too?" Li Jinfeng walked forward and said with a smile, "You little rascal, you ran quite fast. I said that I would send you back to the villa last time. When I arrived at the escort agency after you were almost recovered, you and your second brother were not there. I asked around and found out that you had returned long ago. Your second brother actually ran out too. I made a wasted trip. It's my day off today. I was bored at the academy, so I came out. I wanted to see you, but I didn't know how to find you. That's why I dragged your second brother over." Zhang Xiaohua asked again, "Second brother, when did you come back? Did it go well?" Zhang Xiaohu smiled and said, "I've been back for a few days. Didn't I tell you that it was near Pingyang City? It's not that far. This is the influence of the Misty School. We just went out to gain experience. It's not a big deal." Then, he looked at Zhang Xiaohua's right hand and said, "I've always wanted to come and see you. I don't know how your hand has recovered. There's nothing going on at the Heavy Rain Escort Agency today. We were just staying in the room when young Master Li came. Haha, we came to see you together." Zhang Xiaohua knew that her second brother and Li Jinfeng were worried about her. She stretched out her right hand and made a few forceful grabs. "Look, it's fine now. Leader, he said that as long as I practice diligently, there's still hope for me to recover." Zhang Xiaohu did not expose her and said, "That's the best. Take your time and practice more." Li Jinfeng was also very happy. He said, "That's great. I'll be able to see you practice martial arts very soon. Oh right, I saw that there were books on your bed and table. Looks like you're also very focused on your studies. Not bad, you're actually proficient in both literature and martial arts. Zhang Xiaohua was a little embarrassed. She said, I'm not as good as young Master Li said. I just blindly read when I have nothing to do. Then, Zhang Xiaohua talked about some of the problems she encountered when reading books with Li Jifeng. There were many questions, but when Li Jifeng finished answering them all, he couldn't help but have a whole new level of respect for Zhang Xiaohua. He said, Zhang Xiaohua, you're really not bad. If you didn't look at these questions in depth, you wouldn't have such deep feelings. You're really amazing. I admire you. Hearing Li Jifeng praise his younger brother, Zhang Xiaohu was very happy. When the two finished their discussion, he interrupted and asked, Xiaohua, are you still practicing martial arts? Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly and said, I'm still practicing, but I haven't made any progress. Zhang Xiaohu misunderstood. He thought that he was still practicing forgetful things and didn't know about Zhang Xiaohua's true situation. He smiled and said, It's okay. Practice slowly. One day you'll succeed. Zhang Xiaohua said, I know, second brother. I haven't given up. I'm still working hard. Oh right, what about that internal strength cultivation method of yours? Looking at Zhang Xiaohua's expectant face, Zhang Xiaohu smiled bitterly and said, Sigh, don't be envious of me. This inner strength mantra is not that mysterious. You'll know when you start practicing it. Right now, I'm just barely able to sense qi. I've been running darts for a while now, so I haven't been practicing it myself. In my free time, I've been practicing my 6 complementary fists. However, I've listened to you and practiced the South Branch fists from time to time. After all, I've learned something from it. I've learned a lot from it. Zhang Xiaohua happily listened to his second brother's words. He was happy for his second brother's improvement. Suddenly, he seemed to have grasped something. But when he thought about it carefully, he didn't understand. Thus, he used his left hand to grab Zhang Xiaohu's arm and urgently asked, Second brother, what did you just say? Say it again? Zhang Xiaohu's mouth was crooked. He gasped in pain and said, Xiaohua, hurry and let go. Be gentle. Why did you use so much strength? Zhang Xiaohua finally realized that he had lost his composure. He quickly let go and said embarrassedly, second brother, I'm sorry. What you said just now seemed to have reminded me of something. Don't mind it. Hurry and say it again. Zhang Xiaohu was confused and said, Didn't I just say that I listened to your suggestion and practiced the Nanji Quan? It's a good idea to learn from my previous fist techniques. Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment, then shook his head and said, That's not it. What else? Zhang Xiaohu frowned and said, Also, the internal strength cultivation method isn't as mysterious as you think. Right now, I only have a bit of qi. I didn't say anything else. Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment again, but still shook his head. Zhang Xiaohu had no choice and said, That's all. I didn't say anything else. When I was running darts, I couldn't calm down and practice the internal strength cultivation method. I could only practice fist techniques. Other than the Liuhe Quan and the Nanji Quan, I'm not very familiar with the others. Hearing the 3 words, Liuhe Quan, Zhang Xiaohua's mind flashed. That's right. It's this Liuhe Quan. No wonder second brother said something that moved him so much. He had practiced more than 100 fist techniques, but he didn't learn this Liuhe Quan. What did it mean to turn a blind eye to something familiar? It was probably referring to this kind of situation. Actually, this matter was extremely coincidental. When He Tianshu was teaching Zhang Xiaohua fist techniques, Zhang Xiaohua mentioned that he had seen others execute the Liuhe Quan, but he didn't manage to master even half a move. Furthermore, the Liuhe Quan was famous for its complexity. When He Tianshu saw Zhang Xiaohua's terrifying memory, he couldn't remember to teach him this fist technique no matter what. Perhaps he had chosen to forget. When Zhang Xiaohua was studying the fist technique manual at the Lotus Flower Escort Agency, it wasn't that the agency didn't have a Liuhe Quan fist technique manual. However, because Zhang Xiaohu was famous for practicing the Liuhe Quan, many people went to the library to borrow the Liuhequan fist technique manual to study, hoping to learn something from it. Therefore, the library's fist technique manual had long been borrowed, and Zhang Xiaohua naturally didn't see it. During the days when Zhang Xiaohu was practicing the Liuhequan at the agency, Zhang Xiaohua was concentrating on studying other fist technique manuals. Of course, he didn't think of learning the fist technique that his second brother was so good at. In fact, the fist technique manual that fell from the gap of the bookshelf in Elder Yu's room might have been the Liuhequan fist technique manual. In short, due to various coincidences, Zhang Xiaohua finally remembered that he still had a fist technique that he was most familiar with. It was also the fist technique that he had seen for the first time, the Liuhequan fist technique. He hadn't learned it yet. Sigh, fate makes fools of people. However, since he found another fist technique that he hadn't learned yet, Zhang Xiaohua was still half happy and half worried. He might be able to complete the Liuhequan fist technique, or he might not. In short, he couldn't hold too much hope this time. He only hoped that he could learn a move or half a move from it. Since the person who could teach him this fist technique was his second brother, there was no need for Zhang Xiaohua to be polite. He immediately asked Zhang Xiaohu to set up a stance and teach him. Zhang Xiaohu was even more confused. They had only spoken for a short while, and this younger brother of his was already asking him to teach him the Liuhequan fist technique. Although he didn't mind, when he looked at Li Jinfeng standing beside him and sized up the slightly cramped room, Zhang Xiaohu was a little hesitant. Li Jinfeng seemed to have noticed Zhang Xiaohu's hesitation and hurriedly said, "Brother Zhang, you don't have to mind me. I know Xiaohua's temperament. Moreover, he is also my initiate student. I am also very happy to see his improvement." Zhang Xiaohua finally realized his rudeness and said, "My apologies, young masterly. I will talk to you after I finish learning this fist technique." Zhang Xiaohu then said, "Xiaohua, isn't this room a little small? You might not be able to use it. My room at the escort agency is bigger than this, so I can use it in the room." Zhang Xiaohua rubbed his chin and said, "It's okay, second brother. You can practice slowly and just teach me. I will forget all these moves." Li Jinfeng was stunned when he heard this. What was this? He was teaching you a fist technique, and you said you would forget it. Then why was he teaching you? Zhang Xiaohu understood his meaning. He tilted his head and thought for a moment, then said, "All right, since it's like this, I will start teaching you now." 0. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.